5,000 years ago, in the times of despair, it so happened that humanity was on the verge of disappearance. But there were four great heroes who decided to challenge the supreme evil and save the world from destruction and eternal suffering. The first place in the group was taken by the Archmage Elf, the Star of the Moon. The second place went to the Master, worshipper from the race of gnomes, the divine blacksmith Tuin. Arno was a beast house at the place of honor of the honorary warrior. To defeat the evil, they lacked only the dragon of the guardian, so Luzinus Wise joined the group of the latter. And 5,000 years ago, a terrible bloody battle began. The bodies of the dead soldiers lay on the ground, and the sky glowed with red fire. The young magician tried to help his friends, who were very wounded. Kyle made the maximum of his efforts to cure a huge dragon and asked him not to speak, thereby not complicating the treatment process. But the mythical creature asked a person to take his dragon heart and destroy evil. The guy did not want to listen to his friend because he wanted them to survive and save the world together. The dragon, however, perfectly understood that his time was running out, so he had to cease to waste strength on his treatment. Suddenly, Kyle's eyes widened as he did not expect to see what his friend did. Until the forces left the creature completely, it fluttered its dragon's heart and asked the guy if he remembers their first meeting. They both perfectly remembered that day and the promise to save the world. Only Kyle creaked his teeth, realizing that his friend was sacrificing himself for the sake of others. It was the end of their story. The eyes of Luzinus closed forever. It would not be sad and painful, but the guy held out his hand to the dragon's heart, and magic began to occur. The heart of the dragon, like his memories, became a single whole with Sile. Now the hero had enough strength to continue the begun and destroy the evil, whose name is Robos. The stream of his white strength and energy pierced the red veil of original evil. At this moment, it became clear that Kyle would be those who fulfill their common dream. The man and the demon were left alone on the battlefield. Both were determined to prevail over the enemy. But Kyle's unshakable determination, even the hellish fire of the enemy could not shake, since the desire to save humanity and avenge the fallen friends was stronger than pain and fear. Robos also had no place and time for maneuver, as Kyle was already rushing into the attack. Therefore, he decided to accept the proudly frontal attack of a person. Only now he miscalculated and was expelled from the world of people forever. At least this was said in historical folios. 5,000 years have passed since that day, and Reina read the story of the great hero to her little son Leo and their victim for the good of people. And now the newborn baby, who could not speak, over and over again, had to listen to this story. And his mother could not understand in any way that she was a little overcorned, reading the child the same thing 100 times a day. The problem was that Leo's Aguka did not express a drop of delight. He desperately wanted this torture to stop. After all, he was annoyed by each line read, because on that very day it was he who defeated Robos. And in the book, there was not a single word about him. Time passed, and the place of action from the little house was transferred to the prestigious school of Delana. The academic year began, and the professor began his introductory lecture to the students. It turned out that after the victory over the Robos, the era of the heroes began, and now a heroic protocol was operating in the territory of their country. Over the past 5,000 years, people's lives have changed dramatically for the better. The professor was proud that it was their school that became the venue for qualifying exams at the Lumen Academy. He believed that among the students there would be those who discover the abilities of the heroes and will be able to enter the academy. But his fiery speech did not impress the guy at the last desk who brazenly slept. True, from the loud shout of the teacher, Leo had to wake up, and in addition, it was necessary to get up and try to answer the teacher's question. The teacher demanded that Leo tell him which ritual had to go 5,000 years ago to become a hero. Leo Flew, who knew how things really were, replied that rituals were not needed for this. It was simply necessary to do something outstanding. It was a failure, so a classmate at a nearby desk raised his hand to insert his 5 cents in response. The textbook said that in order to become a hero in those days, a sacred ritual had to be passed. Leo looked at a classmate with contempt, especially when he spoke about the ritual of blood. It was regrettable that the teacher considered the answer to the red-haired boy ideal. After all, no one expected the lesser from the magical genius of Gullivan that the boy's sense of self-importance raised the heights. But no matter how the classmate was puffing, and Leo did not care about him, he only sighed and stared at the textbook. He was sad and funny at the same time, because the main character knew that then rituals were not needed to become a hero, and to meet God was easier than caught a hare in the forest. At that moment, he remembered his fallen friends, and the miracle, who sent the gods to the lower world to celebrate the victory over the Robos. It became lousy in his soul, and the guy slammed the textbook. Still nothing new and interesting there was written there. Until now, he could not understand why after centuries they remembered and honored everyone except him. Suddenly, all the students crowded near the window as they saw the emblem of their idols who arrived on a visit to school. Meanwhile, the corridor, accompanied by knights, proudly paced Celia Zerdinger. And the director was in a hurry to gather everyone in the assembly hall for this important reason. Even Leo reluctantly stood up because of the desk, although Gullivan, as always, misunderstood his gesture, believing that a classmate is going to somehow attract the attention of guests. Only here is bad luck. Leo just wanted to quickly go home, since there will be no more lessons. After all, his such events were not interested in a drop, so he slowly went to the exit. Such a classmate's behavior knocked out the soil from under the feet of Gullivan, and he began to prove that he wanted to go to the assembly hall to evaluate the rival. Leo did not listen to the boy. He decided to spend time with greater benefit, devoting him to training, which will definitely come in handy in his life. The training was in full swing and took a lot of effort, so the guy decided to catch his breath and think a little. Leaving the training room, he went out into the fresh air. The guy understood that he was tired stronger, since this body was many times less than the past. Suddenly, they attacked him from the air, deciding to take advantage of his thoughts. Nevertheless, the main character managed to block the girl's attack. It was obvious overnight that such sparring was commonplace for them, although the attack due to the ambush was superfluous. But the girl did not listen to the guy, and again attacked him, considering this battle his last test before enrolling in the academy. No matter how hard it was, but Leo managed to block this blow. The stubbornness of the guy only redeemed the girl, and she wanted to change the battle style to a more aggressive one. Only now her plans remained plans, since Leo successfully counterattacked. Now he watched the rival flew off a few meters from him. Still, whatever one may say, but his mother had a strange manifestation of love and care. In vain he said this, as in vain he blocked all the attacks of the parent because she began to radiate murderous energy, attacking her son. At that moment the woman was really scared. After all, her son froze, and she realized that this time she hit quite strongly, and he may not be able to block the blow. Leo did not even try, but simply tried to dodge, leaving a little on the side of the attack line. After which he counterattacked, having achieved that his opponent fell to the ground and dropped his sword. Looking at the tip of the son of her son, she suddenly realized that her child's talent was more than she could expect. The training battle ended, and the woman asked her son if he wanted to enter the Lumen Academy. The answer was positive, since it was there that there was a chance to find out what happened to him after that legendary battle. The heart satisfied the woman, and then she informed the heir that members of the Roger clan would soon come to their estate and live here for several days. She did not really like this idea, but she wanted to ask Zeus Zeringer to teach her son the techniques of their kind aura. The woman was sure that if her child masters these techniques, she could easily enter the academy. It was cute, only Leo planned to enter Lumen this year. Meanwhile, in the courtyard, the estates have already begun to build knights in anticipation of important guests who were supposed to appear here from a minute. The crew of the graders arrived at the Flu estate, but Celia did not understand why the uncle wanted to live here, and not in an expensive hotel. To put it mildly, she did not like this idea, since the girl wanted to focus on entrance exams, and not that's all. But Zeus was curious to look at Leo, who was not at all interested in meeting them. According to the girl and the guy, there was nothing interesting, because he still has not mastered the aura. Nevertheless, they went into the house where the servants were already running around them, and the welcoming hosts met with the dignity of aristocrats. Rhine and Deed Flo were supposedly greeted the guests of her house. Unlike the Marquess Flu, Celia was in no hurry to introduce herself, so Zeus reminded her of the manners. Only after that the girl did everything as expected. For the mistress of the house, such a greeting was enough, but the girl realized that the Reina was very similar to her father and uncle. But such a similarity was not surprising, because in the girlishness of the Rhine wore the surname of the Gradinger and was the sister of Zeus. On this, the formalities were over. The brother and sister sat down to drink tea. While the conversation, Zeus said that Leo did not wait for them, and immediately after the lessons went home. It was so similar to the boy that Reina laughed, saying that nothing is interesting besides training. And in the training hall, meanwhile, Celia and Leo decided to get acquainted, but for this they chose a non-trivial way, a fight. Adults, without knowing anything, continued the conversation. Reina considered her son very gifted, and besides, she believed that he inherited their family flame. And Leo, without further ado, confidently attacked Celia. Zeus, oddly enough, also did not know anything about the battle in the yard, but was sure that he personally needed to confirm the words of his sister. To do this, he could only look out the window, because there Leo touched Celia. The girl hardly managed to block his blows. In such a state of things, the main character really liked. Having finished the brawl with Celia, the guy retired in one of the halls of the mansion and began to meditate. Suddenly, he abruptly opened his eyes and looked at his hand, realizing that he was finally able to arouse and curb aura. Until this moment, he had only the reason for him, why he could not master the foundations of ownership of the aura. After all, every time he tried to incorporate the aura, she was rejected by his weak body. Because of this, he lost the opportunity to accumulate Manu, and spiritual energy disappeared. Remembering the last battle from a past life, Leo reproached himself for not being well controlled by the power and energy of his friends. After all, if he were more skillful, then at that time a disaster could be avoided, but everything happened as it happened. Therefore, in this life, the guy completely decided to master the art of control. and began with an aura. But he did not give a voice to think of the thought, who forced the protagonist to turn into. Leo did not expect to see Celia in front of him, who stood and waited for his reaction to his spectacular appearance. She is naively sexy that she can evaluate his skills, believing that they were at a decent level, but in fencing he needed to take a couple of lessons from her. Thus, the girl wanted to win the location of the reina. Besides, she was confident in her abilities. And to finish the conversation on this, only Leo believed that it makes no sense for him to take lessons from a person whose skills are worse than his own. The girl did not expect such impudence, as she did not believe that the guy in front of her has a force exceeding her. Leo realized that in the battle to death, he most likely could lose, but not in this particular situation. In addition, if you take into account only fencing, then he had high chances of victory. It was too much, so Celia looked around and saw a rack with different weapons. Without hesitation, she chose a sword and invited the main character to arrange sparring in order to once and for all understand which of them is the best. Excessive self-confidence pushed the girl to the duel because she believed that with the aura, this guy was not an equal to her. It was not very interesting to hold a fight for just like that, so they decided to fight for interest. If Leo loses, then he will be a servant of Celia for a week. If the girl loses, then she will serve the main character for a week. Now Leo woke up with interest, so he took his sword, offering to start the battle immediately. Not to mention the word, he was the first to attack the opponent who blocked his blow. But this gave her the opportunity to understand that Leo was good at the speed and dexterity of striking. Nevertheless, in order to defeat her, this was not enough, so they attacked each other at the same time. Only now, the power of Leo's blow this time was tens of times stronger, so the girl was thrown aside by a wave. Leo was not going to give her the opportunity to recover, and rushed again on the attack. And then Celia was not laughing and confidence in her exclusivity, since it was clear that she could not block this blow. The guy's sword walked a centimeter from the girl's head, showing that he would have needed 3 attacks to kill her. Suddenly, the main character realized that his rival used a shield from the aura, which violated the rules of their competition from fencing. Celia tried to convince the opponent that it was just a reflex, not a scam. But even with such a warehouse, Leo was going to win, which was very surprised and frightened by the opponent. It seemed as unrealistic as possible. The not Leo was confident in himself, and then threw magic weights to the feet of Celia. Now nothing restrained neither the strength nor the speed of the protagonist, who began to attack the opponent's shield. The sword shattered to smithereens, and then a wave of fear covered the girl. After all, now her opponent was not a simpleton, but a monster. It is not clear where they appeared in his body. Meanwhile, Zeus and Rhine calmly walked the park. Suddenly, a calm and thoughtful Leo emerged around the corner. The time has come, and the boy to get acquainted with his uncle and the guest of their estates, what he willingly did. A minute after official greetings, the man and the boy shook hands. It was great, but the woman was worried about whether her son met with Celia met. And then, as luck would have it, the knights carried the girl on a stretcher from the training hall, as she lost consciousness during their fight. It is logical that Zeus was worried and demanded that the knights answer what happened to his niece. The servant's story struck him to the core, as it was difficult to believe that the guy without an aura could defeat Celia. Although his uncle and wilted the guy a compliment, he did not think that he did something special. It was the girl who underestimated him. And then he proudly talked about what he won by defeating Celia. And now Celia will help him around the house for a whole week, performing the duties of an ordinary maid. Drama of his uncle changed. He considered a good quality the ability to keep his word, but not when it concerned the heiress of the genus of the Zerdinger. Therefore, he was opposed to the girl to do dirty housework, even for her cousin. But he was ready to offer something valuable if the guy revises his decision, but he did not even listen and refused the offer. Leo believed that Celia herself was to blame for what had happened, because she proposed such a bet herself, and now she should extract a lesson from the situation. Only now, his uncle was not going to retreat, offering to teach the main character the secret technique of breathing and control of the aura of his own. A similar proposal in the context of the salvation of Celia from humiliation, the guy was useless. The jokes ended, and Zeus seriously asked Leo if he realized correctly that the guy was going to use the girl as a servant. And Leo confirmed this with a shadow of regrets. Such a position looked very rude, although in fact Leo did not want to insult anyone. After all, if his uncle taught him this technique as an incentive for victory over Selena, he would accept this proposal without hesitation. And it turns out that a man wants to use his influence in order to cover the girl's oversight, and considers his victory undeserved. Reina silently listened to this conversation, and was quietly proud of the endurance and mind of her son. Now Zeus also understood that he was far from the most ordinary teenager, which caused him interest and smile. Therefore, he called the knights to him, and ordered them to withdraw all the maids of the village, taking the side of Leo. After that, he again drew attention to Leo, and since it was an unofficial visit, he asked to call himself his uncle. The tension between them was asleep, and the guy picked on this proposal. Then he said goodbye and went about his business, and the man looked thoughtfully after him. Zeus was not stupid and understood that Rhaena wanted to ask her son to train her family techniques. And if earlier he was not sure whether it was worth doing, now he promised to persuade his older brother and teach Leo the phoenix breath. Morning came, and sunlight flooded the spacious room of the protagonist. Celia, blushing with embarrassment and shame, she came to Leo's room, saying that she was ready to fulfill the responsibilities of the maid. It must be admitted that the maid outfit was going on. This despite the fact that the face was a little overwhelmed by negative emotions. To evaluate the appearance of the girl, Leo even came off from reading the book. He did not expect that the daring style of the girl's behavior and such a cute outfit would be harmoniously combined. Celia did not really know how to accept compliments, so she even got a little angry with Leo, who quickly asked her forgiveness. Just unexpectedly for himself, the protagonist remembered a friend from a past life who appreciated beauty in all its manifestations. Leo had the impression that this love was transmitted to him as a viral disease. In those days, his own dreamed of peace and about spreading beauty everywhere. And it was wonderful, though excessive honesty just harmed him because the moon and Lazinas did not appreciate his gusts of the soul. Two was mistaken when he asked them to pose him without clothes, for which the girls were beaten. Suddenly, Celia drew attention to the book in the hands of the guy and asked what she was talking about. Leo was in no hurry to tell, saying only that in childhood he often read it. But then it turned out that the girl often read this book in childhood. This was a very strange coincidence, therefore. Drawing her attention to the closet, the girl went to him. Surprisingly, he was scored by books on history, from which we can conclude that Leo was obsessed with it. The girl did not escape the attention of the girl and the fact that there were a lot of books about Kaylee. The protagonist believed that among the acts of great heroes were those that are difficult to attribute to one of them. Therefore, he was sure that these achievements were supposed to belong to Kyle. This assumption was outraged by Celia, as she considered Kyla a simple deceiver who appropriated other people's merits to herself. Knowing the truth, Leo was insulting to hear such accusations. But so many historians and ordinary people thought, including a girl. It was unpleasant to realize that people remembered him so wretched, but what was, that is, and now it was time to eat and go to training. Celia immediately perked up and asked to practice with the main character. Leo was not against it, but did not want the girl to cry if she did not keep up with him. At that moment, common sense won pride, but as soon as the training began, Celia realized that she was painful, insulting, and unpleasant. But Leo was not particularly worried. He noticed that when the girl begins to get tired, her reactions slow down and gaps appear in defense. Celia could not understand why it was so much to strain the body. Did it really help somehow in training? The point was that in the modern world, adolescents, according to Leo, began to regret themselves too much, forgetting about the basics. Indignation from such a statement made the girl rise from the floor. The legs shook a little with fatigue, but the fire burned in the eyes, and Celia was ready to continue the training. She wanted to prove to the guy that she was capable of more, so he should not underestimate her. And at the same time, she attacked a young man. But even such zeal and determination was not enough, therefore, Leo easily repelled the attack. And Celia once again missed a blow and fell to the floor of the training room. It was a complete fiasco, because besides the fact that she fell, she also released the sword out of her hands. Leo could not help but notice that the opponent was very difficult and she was angry with herself, since she could not defeat the guy. But Leo did not pay attention to her reaction and instead handed her a bracelet. As soon as the girl was accepting a gift, he abruptly nailed her to the floor at the feet of the protagonist. And he is glad to try, since now she should wear this magic waiting agent for every training. So several days passed, and Zeus carefully watched their training in the open air. The man knew perfectly well that this experience would benefit, since before entering the academy, she needed to go a little from heaven to earth. I was exhausted. The girl sat on the ground, and Zeus called Leo to her. When the main character approached him, the man told him that he decided to ask his older brother to teach the nephew of the phoenix breathing technique. The guy clearly did not expect such a positive turn of events. It was luck, since Leo understood that it was about the main technique and secret to the family of the Zerdinger, which only selected family members could study. It was not without that Celia did not insert her 5 cents into the conversation. The girl was sure that her father would not go to it. The girl did not open America, so Zeus came up with one condition, the fulfillment of which should definitely convince her older brother. So Leo must have entered the Lumen Academy this year. And then the outrage of Celia reached an exorbitant level, since she understood that since Leo could not use the aura, it means that she would lose in a real battle. But the main character was calm and smiled strangely, admitting that he had no real experience of battles, involuntarily recalling itself 5,000 years ago in one of the bloody battles. Therefore, now he was not particularly worried, even though he had not yet managed to repeat the exploits of the past in this life. Zeus was looking forward to an answer to his proposal. The guy's answer depended on the role of his parents. Then his uncle asked him to accept as an axiom that his parents agree. Once, then Leo accepted the challenge. The break was over on this note, and young people continued their training. A week passed, and the students gathered at the appointed time, in the appointed place to pass the entrance exams. Celia and Leo stood nearby and did not pay attention to the whispers of the crowd. Besides, the guy was generally calm, like a boaver. At that moment, one of the students called out to the girl and quickly began to approach her. It was Gullivan, who did not understand that Leo forgot with his idol nearby, only as if he did not try, as he did not imagine and did not remind of himself. But from the guy and from the girl he achieved only total ignore. The longer Gullivan spoke, the stronger he annoyed Celia, who did not remember him from the word at all. On this note, she decided to finish an empty conversation and, grabbing Leo by the hand, flooded him away from a classmate. But they could not go far, since the girl was called again, and this time she could not ignore the calls. And if you want, you don't want to, but you need to reckon with your brother and sister from the genus. Celia told her brother that these guys from the League of Heroes of the Lodran Empire. In addition, if it happens that Reline will become in their way, then they must do everything so as not to lose them. Despite the mutual hostility for the rest of the students, they showed a high level of manners and even exchanged greetings. After that, Celia introduced Kuzin to friends, saying that he belongs to the famous family Flu. After listening to her, Abbat concluded that he was in front of him the most ordinary small bipod. The young man was also sure that it was he who would receive the first place in the exam, after which he proudly left his sister. The behavior of Revelines to the dentist was annoyed by the Celia, so she really wanted to show them that she is stronger and better in everything. At that moment, a spectacular man appeared behind the tribune, who noticed that everyone who wanted was already gathered in the hall. Today their examiner will be R.V. Jerome, who served as a professor at the Lumen Academy. Leo, as always, did not understand what was so special in a person in front of him. Once again, Celia was amazed at his brother's lack of education, but explained that R.V. is one of the heroes which was brought into the heroic protocol. This made the guy carefully look at the teacher. And now it has become really interesting, since Manhwa was special in the right eye of Arvo. The man did not pay attention to the students and studied the exam rules. They were waiting for the battle one-on-one and the battle with the monster. The conditions arranged students, but for some reason the professor set fire to the sheets in his hands. After all these methods and rules, in his immodest opinion, were too boring. And he was never a lover of tedious parties, so he took out a book from a secret pocket of his jacket, since this event lacked the light, and he began to activate the heroic protocol, loading the world of Arvi, transferring students to it, to the prologue, Heroic Forest. It was impossible to take his eyes off the magical action of Arvi. Besides, he hated ineffective methods of doing business. Only now Celia did not expect such a turn of events, and did not know how to react to what was happening. But the professor had not been dealing with this. He decided to combine one-on-one and the battle with the monster in one test. But Leo carefully watched the stream of mana in the right eye of Arvi and did not look away from him. Involuntarily, he recalled the lessons at school, which said that the heroic protocol is not just a historical guide. His true power and value were that a person could create a separate world of heroes, which contained the experience of past heroes. In addition, they themselves could plunge into this world and immerse others. The cherry on the cake was that with the help of the heroic protocol, one could inherit the power of the hero of the past. But now it acted as a training site for future heroes. In a minute, the students were in the middle of a wild forest, and their main goal was to survive. So, everyone had to survive at all costs. But if someone wants to give up, he must break the sphere in his hand. At that moment, many began to get nervous, and Leo understood that this place has not changed. Previously, elves lived in this forest until the witch Salanda poisoned him. Leo's memories were beautiful, but he had to pay attention to the terrible sounds that scared other students. The guys looked at the bushes, and some of them already wanted to go home, and not all that. There were also those who considered that this is all an illusion, which means they have nothing to worry about. But this world would not be arranged so simple. Yes, his basis was the memoirs of the examiner, but the events were all real. Therefore, Leo perfectly understood that any danger and threat of life was absolutely real, and you can die easier. He was on the alert, and instantly reacted when someone decided to attack him. Near the trees, there was a silhouette of an attacked girl. The main character easily dodged the attack, and the arrow landed next to him, and the guy carefully examined the silhouette in front of him. The girl was not going to stand on the sidelines, so she went out into the clearing. Chelsea smiled, as she was looking forward to the moment when to get rid of the supporter of the graders. It was very unpleasant to hear this, but Leo hurt what was called a granger because he belonged to Field. If so, then the girl did not understand why the guy was friends with Celia while going to attack him. But since the attack of the wind fell through, Chelsea decided to use a sickle of wind. Leo thought for a moment. In his past life, there was no similar spell. True, the basic principles remained the same, so he exposed his sword, preparing to accept the battle. His actions caused the girls' laughter. They also insulted Chelsea because it seemed to her that Leo was not seriously tuned to the battle. Therefore, she got angry and began to draw a magical formula for attack in the air. The formula was finished, and she struck the guy from a very long distance. But Leo's light movement of the sword repelled the attack. Chelsea frowned. She did not understand how Leo was able to block her attack because he did not use the aura. Her attack was so obvious that it was not even funny, so he suggested that Chelsea join his efforts. Only now the girl was not going to do this, and in general she is a fighting magician. The next attack will be as effective as possible. At this moment, Leo realized that he had a remark to her aloud, so he specified that wind attacks could be more interesting and not so straightforward. Chelsea got angry. She was combined with an arrow of wind and a sickle of wind and attacked the protagonist. But this time, something went clearly wrong because Leo disappeared somewhere, while the girl did not even feel a hint of the use of the aura. While the girl was thinking, Leo appeared right in front of her, about to hit her fist. The act is not gentlemanly, but the exam is an exam besides. Leo once again politely asked Chelsea to join him. Apparently the main character again received a refusal, since the girl was not tied to the pillar for a reason. And Leo, as if nothing had happened, made a bonfire nearby. The evening came. The fire of the fire became more intense. Chelsea came to her senses and began to understand that things were not the best way for her. It is not surprising that she was scared, because it was not for long to become a barbecue. Leo was calm as a bover, once again asking her about profitable cooperation. Sadly, but the answer was again negative, and all because the girl no one was needed except her brother. She even tried to attack her enemy again, but the magic of restrictions worked, and her attack failed. It was a small trump card, Leo, but the problem was that he had a small supply of mana. It's good that Chelsea did not know about it, though she was sure that even without her magic, she could get out of the trap. Only now Leo was not going to give her the opportunity to do this. The flame in the stake became sharply stronger and began to approach the feet of the girl. After a couple of seconds, the fire reached the clothes of Chelsea, falling the edge of her dress. This forced the girl to change her decision, but the main character was not enough, and he asked her to give him an oath of family. Riding away, the girl did what was required of her. Now the protagonist was pleased, realizing that fellow students are too easy to manipulate. Then he untied Chelsea, and she began to fall down. But she never reached the ground, since she was caught by Leo, who was glad to become her ally. Meanwhile, in the walls of the educational institution, the retired students observed the passage of the exam on large screens. Arvi was extremely disappointed, since none of the students approached his standards, because they all chose the path of battle with each other. While he discovered only one couple of students who caught the essence of this task. They turned out to be the irreconcilable enemies of Abbot Revelin and Celia Zerdinger. Suddenly, another pair of students who fought with the monster attracted his attention. Most of all, the professor intrigued the confident style of the battle Leo Fao. Yes, he did not possess the strength and grace of Celia and Abbot, but the fact that he bowed to the joint work of Chelsea was already worthy of a passing point at the academy. In addition, all the guy's tricks made him a dark horse of this exam. Meanwhile, Chelsea and Leo killed the next monster, chopping off his head. The next dead monster made Chelsea admit that joint work with the knight greatly simplifies the task of survival. But the fact that at the same time all Leo does not use the aura for the girl struck to the core. While the girl was trying to understand how the guy copes with the task without an aura, the next monster was watching them. Leo decided to explain everything to her on the example of using the magic of the wind, so the first thing he asked her about what is the basis of her magic. Such an unexpected question made the gear in Chelsea's head work at a double speed. But suddenly she felt the presence of the enemy, so she used a sickle of wind to neutralize it. The goblin fell the death of the brave. Chelsea was proud of herself and believed that to discuss the magic of the wind in the presence of the representative of the Revelin clan was simply blasphemous. Leo admitted that the girl was very gifted, but at the same time he understood that she did not know how to use her strength correctly. This outraged the girl, so she decided to express her dissatisfaction, but Leo stopped her with a sign of her hand. His attention was attracted by the corpses of monsters that were like mummies. Now he clearly understood what the conditions for passing this exam were, but unexpectedly an attack was made on them. But Leo was able to dodge an unexpected attack and save Chelsea. It was regrettable to understand that not everyone understood the basic rules of this exam, so the guy looked at his classmates who longed for his death. No wonder, but one of the attackers was Gullivan, who did not like the protagonist. It was he who gave the order to classmates to attack Leo together. Only now the main character was not going to stand aside and wait until he was beaten, so he struck the first. It was very unlucky to experience all the power of Leo's fists. Leo easily sent the attacker in the knockout, while forcing Gullivan to experience a sense of fear. The guy decided to take the main blow to himself, but at the same time he asked Chelsea to cover his back. She pulled herself together and became next to the main character, and their classmates rushed to the attack. The guys did not yet understand that in vain they challenged Leo. Meanwhile, Gullivan ran cowardly from the battlefield. He believed that he was doing the right thing, and the best solution to the problem was to find another stronger team. Not far from the road along which Gullivan was running, she stood Celia. She noticed with her side vision that he was running from somewhere, so she offered her companion to go in that direction. Abbot and Celia came to the clearing and stirred to see what was happening there. There were corpses of monsters and their classmates who were unconscious, and in the middle of all this stood Chelsea and Leo. At that moment, Chelsea saw that her brother had come to the clearing, which she was not said. Brother and sister began to hug, and Celia arranged Leo interrogation what he was doing here with this girl. The main character was pleased with himself because he still managed to convince Chelsea to cooperate with him, although at first she did not really want to. Celia was curious what the main character did to convince Chelsea. But Leo did not give out his secrets, but instead he began to help his classmates beaten. Lady Revelin could not understand why this guy began to help their enemies. The answer was simple. They did not need to fight with each other. For this, they had this world. But the main thing was not even that. In this wild forest there was a terrible anomaly, and in order to understand this, it was necessary to just look at the corpses of monsters. For clarity, the guy stepped on one of the corpses, saying that if you look closely, you can see that all the juices were squeezed from him. But this was far from everything, because if you think about it, then the monsters were no longer visible in the forest. The first to come to her senses, she also did not understand where the rest of the monsters went. It seemed that they were all hidden somewhere, since there was something insanely terrible in the forest. Obviously, if a high-ranking monster lives in this forest, then their examiner wants students to kill this monster. Abbat came to this conclusion. At this moment, friends saw and felt a surge of magical energy. Only one Gullivan did not see, and did not feel dangers in the thicket of a wild forest. The only thing the guy could think about is to do such that Leo failed this exam. Suddenly, he looked at his feet and saw a corpse of a classmate there. He did not differ in particular courage, so he fell to the 5th point and shook with fear. The most disgusting was that someone's saliva began to drip on the staff. Then the same saliva began to drip on his head. And when he raised his head up, he saw a huge spider in front of him. Meanwhile, Arvi was in a safe place and watched how Leo and the rest passed the exam. The retired students discussed how many opponents they managed to eliminate. The professor understood that about 500 students failed, but this was not the limit yet, although only 50 students remained in the test, while the professors had to select 100. Arvi believed that it was better to expel everyone than to miss those who did not represent anything, while he knew very well that the director Kallian gave him permission. Looking at how Leo helps his comrades, the man understood that real heroes were born in difficult times. In addition, the professor was extremely surprised that the guy noticed an anomaly in a wild forest. The guys hurried forward, and Arva thought about whether they could resist the horror of this world. The problem was that it was difficult to make out something in this forest, as it was too dark there. Celia stopped the first, as she felt that something was hanging over them, so she asked her comrades to be extremely careful. When she illuminated the space, everyone saw a huge spider, in the paste of which their classmate was. She did not expect to see such a picture, so she was extremely surprised. Abbat was the first to come to his senses, so he decided to use a sickle of wind to destroy the monster. But this attack could kill Gullivan, so Leo stopped the guy and asked his classmate to crush the sphere that he held in his hand. At first, the guy did not want to do this, but then he realized that he had no other choice. After a second, he crushed the sphere and got out of the mouth of a spider, glowing with a golden light. Now everyone else could calmly fight the monster. Abbat applied his fang of wind to the monster. It only wounded the spider a bit. It was obvious that such an attack could not be killed. Students froze on the spot, since they did not understand what to do now. But the spider was angry and earnest. Now he was ready to kill everyone in his path. But one of the students, feeling immortal, decided to attack the princess of spiders from above. Only now his attack failed and ended mortally for him. There was nothing to do, and Celia decided to join the battle, deciding to kill the spider with one blow. To do this, she used one of the secret techniques of her family. Only she did not take into account the fact that the spider could quickly regenerate. The girl did not believe her eyes, realizing that her secret techniques became less and less with every minute. But the situation decided to try to save Abbat, who believed that the difference between the destructive power of the knight and the magician has a huge difference. At this very moment, he began to conjure. It must be admitted that his magical power was really very great, but even after he applied his most powerful spell, his result was clearly not pleased. The spider was more alive than all the living, while very angry and ready to eat it at the same second. Chelsea was very scared for her brother, so she decided to try to save him with the destructive power of her wind. Not to say that it helped a lot, but the damage was minimized, and the guy was only slightly wounded by the moth of the monster. As soon as the guy was on the ground, his sister immediately ran up to him. He tried to assure her that everything was fine with him. But there was nothing good with him or with other guys, since everyone was damn scared, because the regeneration of this monster was incredibly fast. It took him only a few seconds to heal all his wounds and be prepared for an attack. Only one Leo seemed to be all in any way. He stood calmly and said that it was a monster from the army of Erebors, which destroyed the elven forest. Now all the classmates only looked at him because they could not believe that they had met the legendary monster. Leo himself was thinking about another. He was not mistaken in the fact that his mother belonged to King Fei in the right eye of the professor. He recalled that the tarantula is the rules in the damned forest and hunted for elves. At that time, the tarantula bit the right hand of King Fei, who came out against her, but the protagonist was sure that the moon then destroyed the monster. But it seems that it so happened that the right hand of King Fei saved tarantula, although if it is already completely accurate, not the hand itself, but the ring of life that was in the stomach of the spider. Meanwhile, Abat and Celia began to argue among themselves which of them would kill the tarantula, since it was her death that was the key to passing this exam. At the same time, they began to attack the monster from different sides. Well, it was a disastrous tactic. Leo tried to explain to friends that in this way they could not defeat the monster, since it would regenerate until they run out of mana. And the truth now could be noted that the spider, even after such a massive attack, was practically healthy. Celia was waiting for a proposal from Leo. He, without thinking twice, offered Celia and Abata to work together. But the guy and the girl did not want to work together, since each of them needed the highest ball. This dispute seemed to Leo as pointless as possible, since he knew that if they did not destroy the hero's world, he would fail and die. Such a turn of Celia and Abot was clearly not liked. The Abtot was the first to break the silence. He said that even if they work together, they need time to develop a plan. Only they can restrain it under one blow, and only they can restrain it. But this is not so, because Leo was the person who could restrain this monster for a certain period of time. This idea did not like Celia, as she understood that her cousin could not use the aura, but the guy was not going to linger here. He could win a maximum of 5 minutes. He took the weapon that lay on the ground, turned to his friends, and said that fire and wind were always good friends, so do not worry about this. Celia and Abot had no choice but to discard disagreements and work this time together. The main character himself was ready to give a spider battle. The upcoming battle reminded him of the old days. He even experienced a certain excitement challenging the tarantula. The protagonist ruthlessly tested her a claw for a claw. Seeing how Leo was fighting, Celia and Abot even opened their mouths in surprise. Meanwhile, the main character inflicted everything and inflicted new blows to the monster. No matter how strange it was, but the main character experienced a kind of pleasure from the fact that he had the opportunity to kill one of the servants of Robos. Memories, a little elf fled in the forest. He cried, he was very scared, and at some point he got confused in the web. The elf tried to get out, but he did not succeed, and a huge, terrible spider was already in front of him. The kid called to the rescue, and the spider was about to gobble him up. Understanding that his end was close to the elf, closed his eyes and mentally called his mother. At this moment, the baby saw a bright, warm, golden light, and someone drove an evil monster from him. A moon appeared in the clearing, which fearlessly walked towards danger. The girl was excited and did not understand how this monster deliberately invade her homeland and gobble up the emperor's right hand. But the conversations ended on this, and she began to conjure, creating a huge ball of light. Now the spider was scared and he tried to escape. But the magic of Elphic reached it. All living things in the forest shuddered from a powerful explosion. But the moon came to the forest not alone, but with its comrades, who did not expect that the fate of Robos would get here. Meanwhile, the caught elf was still in the web, and Kyle extended to him, who asked the guy if he was in order. Remembering the past, Leo understood that now the story was repeated. But the problem was also that he could not fight a spider for a long time, since his supply of mana was limited. Therefore, he urgently needed to adjust his plan. For this, he turned to Chelsea for help. The young man asked the girl to direct all the weapons that lay on the ground to him with the help of magic and wind. Leo, meanwhile, continued to resist the monster. The spider did not stand still, and also attacked the young man with his claws. For the first time in all the time, Chelsea began to worry about Leo, because she understood that if he continues to move, then the weapon that she sends to him could hurt him. But the guy could not stand still, otherwise the spider would finish him off. So dodging the next attack of the claw, he asked the girl to hurry. Since Chelsea began to conjure, but she did not understand which weapon should raise magic for Leo. He was not fundamentally, the main thing is that at least some he had in stock in order to be able to strike the monster. He listened to the sounds and concluded that Yatagan and A&a-half sword were flying to him. The guy intercepted them with dexterity and was now armed and very dangerous. He rushed to meet the spider with lightning while cutting his claws into several parts. Suddenly another problem formed. This weapon was of low quality, so it quickly broke and it constantly needed a replacement. Chelsea herself saw this perfectly, so she did not resist and conjured as quickly as she could. Leo grabbed some blade after another and threw him into the monster. Everyone understood that although the main character was their peer, but what he was doing now did not go into any framework. All the decisions and the battle style made by the guy said that they have an unusual student in front of them, and at least the god of war. Nevertheless, the spider managed to hurt him, but the guy was not very worried about the reason. He was happy that it was still quite in good physical shape, and the body remembered past skills. Leo did not have the right to bring his comrades from a past life, because if he cannot crush this bug, then how to look into their eyes after death? Since he was not going to stop there, and again attacked the monster, breaking another blade, and asked Chelsea to throw him a new one. The swords ended, but this was no longer a big problem, since Celia and Abat finished preparing their joint spells and asked the guy to step aside. And after a few seconds, the girl launched a pillar of fire in the monster. Now exactly the spider was like a burning torch, which soon had to turn into a corner. The monster burned down, and the ring of King Fei fell out of his body. It was an unconditional victory, since this chapter, a RV was passed by our group of students who stood and looked at the corpse of the legendary monster, not to convey in words how Celia was glad that everything finally ended. The only ones who have not yet expressed any emotions were Leo. He stood and looked at the spider, and the girl suddenly realized that he alone kept the monster as long as 5 minutes. She already wanted to praise her cousin, but Chelsea interrupted her, who joyfully screamed, expressing her gratitude to the main character. It was difficult not to notice that Chelsea was impressed by the actions of the protagonist, so she compared him to Kyle from the Legends. The girl even wanted the guy to give her several near-battle lessons. But Celia Hacking smiled at the hacking as she knew very well what training her cousin was conducted. While the girls argued among themselves, Leo held out her hand to the ring of King Fei. But as soon as the ring was in the hands of a young man, a small creature appeared from him. Then, in a small creature with wings, Leo recognized Prince Silida. The main character at that moment experienced the vague hope that the prince remembers him, remember who he was in his last life, so he called his past name. Silid said nothing, he only smiled affectionately to the main character. After which he returned back to the ring, and Leo suddenly realized that the prince had managed to become the true King Fei. The countdown began, and the students had to return to the audience, but unexpectedly, Leo got the oath of King Fei. Meanwhile, the director of the Academy Lumen studied the report on the passage of exams by students in the Western lands. Callian looked very pleased with the results, and even intrigued in places. The assistant director was not so satisfied, since he understood that RV most likely hesitated many, but still wanted to know the number of students who passed the professor's exam. This time, RV took 40 students in training, this despite the fact that the director expected that he would leave only 10 of them, so he asked his assistant not to be so harsh with the professor. In addition, after studying the report, the director realized that this year there are quite a few talented students, such as Celia and Abat, but besides this, RV nominated the candidacy for the post of elders of the first year, which was uncharacteristic. But it was more interesting what the professor nominated for an unknown young man. Meanwhile, a group of students returned to the audience, the rest of them welcomed, including the professor with their silent gaze. In his head, many questions were spinning about the personality of Leo. But not only the professor had a lot of questions, the director of the academy also was looking forward to meeting a young man, because Arva said that the guy had a talent to be a hero. The exam ended, and Leo lay in hot water in the bathroom in her estate. He understood that the pain in the body could only be cured in this way. He could not understand why King Fei had an oath, because if you think about it, then such awards were not provided for the passage of levels in the world of heroes. But after some circumstances, only he was received by such a reward. Why? This is the question. Suddenly, the Rhine entered the bathhouse without knocking. She considered this moment the most suitable time to tell her son why she was expelled from the family of a Gradenier. This happened many years ago. Then she had to make a difficult choice, and she decided to save her colleague. But in order to do this, she had to sacrifice a kind of flame. Nevertheless, she did not regret a single minute about what she did, exactly what she did not surprise her son. The woman told this story only in order to direct her talent and strength in the right direction, and then congratulate him on admission to the Academy of Lumen. A new day has come, and through the gates of the teleport, Leo stepped on Lumeria's land. Before his eyes, just a delightful landscape opened. On the island, behind the lake, one could see the beautiful building of the Lumen Academy. At that moment, a man approached the young man and asked how the boy spent the whole last month. It was a pleasant meeting, since the boy's uncle turned out to be a stranger. They shook hands and greeted each other. If Leo spent this month very calm, then hot discussions sharpened in the House of Grains. The guy understood that they were discussing to give him the plans of Phoenix or not. After all, the problem agreed that the Rhine was no longer a member of the Zerdinger family, but Leo was her son. Nevertheless, the elders of the clan were very surprised by the fact that Leo successfully managed to pass the RV exam, so they made their positive decision. Therefore, Uncle handed the nephew a spatial key. Then he asked the boy to open an invisible door. As soon as he turned the key, the flame blazed in front of him, and the book appeared. The book opened on its own, and the flame became much stronger, burning a young man. The next step in Leo was to sprinkle the pages of the book with his blood. For this, he bit his finger. After that, drops of his blood fell on the snow, white pages of the book. The generic magic began to work, so a golden light appeared around the book and the boy. After that, letters appeared on the pages of the book, and Zeus informed his nephew that only Leo could read this book and no one else can read. The man understood that the secret techniques of their family were not so simple, but he was sure that Leo could also master them as soon as possible. Zeus was glad that his nephew has now become part of his family. On this note, their meeting ended, and Leo went to the city to look for Celia. He remembered that the cousin wanted to meet him somewhere here, but where exactly he did not know, so he looked carefully on the sides. Suddenly, a small incident occurred. A girl who carried a huge stack of books crashed into a guy. The stranger fell, the books fell, Leo fell. The girl once worried about this incident. The girl began to collect her books and asked the guy forgiveness for not seeing where she was going. Taking the books, she quickly ran away, leaving Leo alone in the middle of the street. She took the books, but she forgot the identity certificate, so the young man carefully lifted him from the ground. Thus, he found out that this girl is Chloe Miller, and she is also a freshman of the Lumen Academy. Nevertheless, this whole situation helped the guy remember where he had to meet his sister, so he went to the nearest doors of the store. Celia bought different things in order, but she claimed that they had to buy many more books and a uniform for training at the academy. But her mood changed dramatically as soon as Leo informed her that Uncle Zeus detained him, reporting good news. The young man and I began to tell anything, but decided to demonstrate, so his palm was abandoned by a warm flame. On the palm of his hand was just the beginning of him, a tribal flame of graters. The guy was wondering if he was doing everything right. Such Celia did not expect to see, so with delight she even dropped bags with her purchases. And Leo was glad to try. He liked the effect that he had for a girl. Celia even fell to the floor because she did not understand who her brother was, because it took her a lot of time to master the technique. With purchases, they finished. Meanwhile, the pier account moored a huge ship, which was about to take them to the island. Leo, the other students were waiting for the moment when they could sit on the ship and go on their unforgettable journey. Suddenly, Professor Eine Landier, who was responsible for the first year of the nightly class, approached them at ease. The guy turned his head to his side, hearing a man's loud voice. He did not particularly ceremony with anyone, so he immediately said that everyone would climb on board quickly, since no one would wait for anyone, and they are sailing right now. Strange, but the situation on board was calm. The students ate. The professor pulled the wine slowly. But the sixth feeling suggested Leo to be on the watchman, so he did not eat or drank anything, but only looked around. At this very moment, some guy called him and Celia, considering that they were a couple, which caused the girls discontent. Carl Thomas decided to make friends with them. He handed Leo his business card and said that the guy could contact him on any issues at the academy. He will try to get everything that he will need for a certain payment. Leo considered him a very interesting young man in front of him, so he introduced himself, saying that he was from the kingdom of Dueling, dating acquaintance. But the main character became interesting. Only one seems to him the whole situation on board slightly strange. It seemed to the guy that it was too quiet, peaceful, and calm, so he was even a little creepy. He also drew attention to the thoughtful behavior of the professor. Carl believed that Leo's fear was in vain, so he ate the cake calmly and thought that to torment students before the start of the distribution would be too stupid. And at that moment, something went wrong, because the deck all trembled as if an earthquake had happened. And then everyone saw how a huge tentacles of a huge octopus appeared from the water. The monster clearly wanted to kill everyone, so Carl barely dodged an unexpected attack, not understanding what began to happen here. Many began to call for the help of the professor, but he did not think to help anyone, because everyone here was candidates for heroes, which meant that if they were in trouble, they could only rely on their own strength. On the one hand, it was the right position, and on the other, the monster looked very unfriendly and evil. Even so far in the head of Leo, a plan to save students has not ripened, and he only looked at the raging monster. The only one who quickly came to his senses was, as always, Leo, who took his sword from the scabbard and cut off the part of the body to the octopus, asking Celia to control himself. This helped the girl recover, and now she was ready to accept the battle. Without knowing the foundations, Celia attacked the monster with fire, for which he doused it with water, which was a natural reaction for him. It got to the point that the octopus grabbed one of the students by the leg, about to send him to his stomach. The main character perfectly understood that in order to save a classmate, he needed to take more active actions. There was nothing to do, and Celia decided to support her cousin, so she ran after him at the tentacles of an octopus. Leo ran ahead of the girl, inflicting a monster with his sword. Working together, they managed to save a classmate who fell on the deck. At that moment, Carl looked out from under the table. He was not surprised at the situation in Kalia, but Leo struck him. But not only the guy and the girl fought with the monster. At that moment, a frozen mite of the octopus fell next to Carl. Carl began to puff like an indignant hedgehog because this claw almost hit him, and Leo calmly looked at the man who made this attack. In a beautiful and strong snowy queen, Leo recognized his recent familiar that he met in the city. She coped very well with her task because her ice magic was very effective against the octopus. Leo could not help but recognize her talent and ability. The girl looked at Leo and Carl and said that if they are not able to stand up for themselves, then let them go aside and do not prevent her from fighting the monster. Carla was outraged by the fact that strong personalities never pay attention to the weaker. They don't care what their actions would lead to and who would fall under the distribution. He was already thrown out of fear when the next tentacles of the octopus fell near his feet. Meanwhile, the battle and Sister Revelin entered the battle. Abat was determined, as he believed that their competition with Selena was not finished yet, but his younger sister was glad to see Leo. Although the guy did not understand, the girl showed sympathy for him, and tender feelings settled in her heart. Here, Professor Ain decided to drink another on a glass of wine, although he knew that many monsters lived in the lake. Well, the appearance of an octopus was already a tradition for a welcoming party of new students. Everything happened exactly since he expected. The elders of different groups of students stood out most of all. For example, Chen Shi from the Eastern Lands. She was not inferior to her to fight Chloe Miller from the Northern Lands, as well as Abbott Revelin and Celia Zerdinger from the Western. Walden Tayden also proved himself to be a good side as a representative of the South. A spectacular show with lightning was arranged by a representative of the Central Region, Duran Moira. The professor could not deny that the newcomers were very talented this year. Therefore, he was calm for the fact that the rest of the students who were not so good too would also get intact and safety. But against the background of all other students, Leo stood out most of all. The professor was amazed at the skill of fencing a young man, since he did not use unnecessary movements. Everything was clearly and verified, as if he had read the enemy's movement. In such a frantic rhythm of the battle with monsters, it lasted all the way to the island where the Lumen Academy was located. Students went ashore not alive. Many of them even fell to their knees after such an unforgettable journey. But Carl was worried that he spent all his stocks of potions that he took to the academy. The trace of them went down to the shore, and Professor, he delighted each student with the fact that they often had to cross this lake, so he advised to get used to such adventures. Nevertheless, he decided that now the time came to show the students the academy, and the first in line was the training ground. The introductory ceremony was supposed to be held here, but everyone understood that each new student was very eccentric, but funny. Beginners had to be built in columns, the first to be those who had the highest score in the entrance exams. As soon as they fulfilled the order, the director of the academy, who made a welcoming speech, took the place behind the stands. He wanted to tell everyone only one thing. If they want to become heroes, then they should be all down 100%. This statement inspired students. The guys listened to him carefully, because further, it was about the fact that they would have to overcome their limits every day. But if someone cannot do this, then he has no place at the Lumen Academy. With these words, the director hit the table with all his might, with all his strength. The poor table broke into small pieces, and now was lying at the feet of the director, who looked at the frightened students. Only now, Callian realized that he slightly went too far, as the stick had such an obvious demonstration of power. Meanwhile, the rest of the professors wanted to merge with the ground, since the longer they taught at the academy, the image of the great swordsman, as the director was before, murk in their eyes. Nevertheless, the introductory ceremony continued, and its presenter asked to climb the rostrum and make a first-year-old year speech. Every day, the best student of his region was looking forward to what would be called his name, but not his guest. And Leo Flo was recognized as the headman. One of the professors asked him to rise on stage, but the guy was in no hurry to do this and carefully looked at Arvi. The cunning smile of the professor said that he was those who recommended the protagonist for the role of the headman. This was of course an unexpected turn, but Leo coped with this. He went on stage and picked up a folder where someone already wrote a speech for him, which he should just read. He began to read his boring, long speech, and the students began to talk among themselves, because each of them thought that some famous student would become the headman, and not understanding who. Thank God Leo quickly coped, but the professors were curious what plans the young man had for next year. But this was already interesting, because the fifth point of Leo felt that the professors wanted him to add oil into the fire, and called the students who rolled in his place. At first, everything was true and decent. He talked about his plans for next year, but at the end of his fiery speech, he added a little pepper and said that if someone wants to take his place, let him try to take him by force. He did not care who his opponent would be, because he was not going to lose. The ceremony ended, and the evening came. Accordingly, all students would have taken their hostel. In the end, the professor said that the next week will be introducing classes. Respectively, each student has the right to attend any classes, independence from the direction that they initially choose. A similar approach to the academy was used so that each student could choose those classes in which he can reveal his potential most profitable. Now everyone could disperse around the rooms and get enough sleep, and in the morning start the educational process. Leo and Carl dated the rooms that were next to each other. This was probably good news, but the time was already later, and it was time to go to bed. But it seems Carl was looking forward to tomorrow morning. Leo also went into his room and immediately fell on the bed. Closing his eyes, he hoped that at the Lumen Academy, he could find what he was looking for so long. In other words, the answers to the questions that tormented him from the moment of rebirth. Namely, he needed a heroic protocol with Kyle's notes, that is, his own. Morning came, and most students gathered in the dining room for breakfast. Carl gained goodies and decided to compose Leo, who ate his steak calmly. Nevertheless, the main character did not mind the guy's campaign, but there were students who decided to ruin Leo's mood on the first school day. The most daring was a student from the central region who was interested in whether the headman seriously spoke during his introductory speech yesterday. Now Leo regretted a little that he gave free rein to a born mischief yesterday, since now strangers would annoy him and run into a fight. The neglect of the protagonist hit Dueling, as he believed that everyone should know his person. Only his fiery speech did not impress Leo and Carl, who erupted their breakfast and ignored the classmate. In vain, they probably behaved like that, because Duran began to throw lightning along the dining room from the covered pride. Obviously, he suggested for a fight, and he was absolutely the same that he spoiled the property of the academy and was scattered by food. Leo had a different opinion, a fight with a fight, but the food is more important, so he masterfully in the air collected a classmate's sandwich, returning his former appearance to him. After all, rushing delicious food was an unforgivable sin. Duran was apparently a great sinner, since he did not care about food. The main thing is to lower the enemy from heaven to earth. But it wasn't there, because as a devil from a snuff box, Professor Ain appeared between them. And obviously he did not come here with good intentions, and most importantly the guys did not understand when he managed to approach them. For a fight on the first day of study, it is obvious that no one was going to stroke the guys on the head, and now a group of students gathered at the training ground and is waiting for the professor's decision. And he stands and is silent. It seemed strange, so one student decided to remind him that it was time to start a lesson. And at that moment, Leo and Duard, sword from sweat, appeared at the training ground, like the nails of today's entertainment program. But here, Leo wiped his nose to the opponent, because after the run, he held onto a bill of fact, even though Celia was worried about his condition. The guy only smiled mysteriously, squinting at the best student of the central region. It seemed on this that the punishment of the guys ended, and the professor began the lesson, first introduced himself. Everyone, except Leo and Duran, listened to him. The same two now led a duel of formidable views. The teacher, on the other hand, began his lecture on Manet. They say she has 3 levels of amplification. It was about the spiritual, magical, and aura, the last of which was the most difficult. He was interested in whether someone knew why so. She flashed with the knowledge of Celia. She knew that Mana was losing her painfulness when the process of transformation into the aura was passing. Bingo, this was the correct answer, because the first 2 types of amplification coexist in complete harmony. But the aura that consumes Manu should adapt to the body of the carrier. Now the professor wanted students to be told about the methods of using the aura accumulated in the body. Celia had a theory, but she was not sure that Ain wanted to hear. She was ahead of Leo, saying that people can use the aura, burning their mana. And this was the correct answer. Now the professor wanted to know if the guy knows what was needed in order to burn Manu. Leo said that for this a person needs endurance, while adding that he had not yet studied this issue anywhere. This impressed Ain more than snow in the summer, because such a deep understanding of the essence of the process without special training was a miracle. This theory was completed, and the professor invited everyone to knead the bones, while demonstrating a reception using the aura. Students, especially the female half, were impressed with what they saw. Ain Chagall through the air using the step of the aura, in which the aura flow concentrated in the legs. Then he went down, deciding to show that you can use the technique in different ways. After all, if you think a little, you can come up with a million ways to use a step in the aura if you want to. So, the students began to practice. Some even managed to walk through the air with difficulty. Others tried to use this technique during sparring. Celia walked masterfully on the ground with his help, and said that Leo would also teach if he begins to call her sister. Similar was below Leo. He himself could cope with the task, since the principles of owning aura were the same everywhere. Meanwhile, the professor with the side vision noticed that Dueling was again scratched his hands to arrange a brawl. Not just scratched, but burned directly. He even bit his finger to stay. But this was in the hand of the professor, so he asked for a minute of attention of the students, recalling that in the morning there was a commotion in the dining room. Chelsea strained a little, since she was not in the dining room in the morning, but Carl was bursting. He knew everything. But just so he did not want to share information. But this was no longer important, since Ain called Leo and Dueling to himself. The professor wanted to realize that he had so angry a student from the central region. True, we must pay tribute to the guy. He said nothing, and if so, then the professor sent them for the manufacture. Now they could honestly compete for the place of the headman on the run, who will come to the finish first to the finish line. He will lead the first course along. The main bun was that the guys could use the aura without restrictions. Duran felt that in this competition, luck on his side. While the guys were preparing to run, Carl did not lose time, but decided to accept bets because the money would not work itself. He understood that most likely Dueling would win, who masterfully owned the aura and attribute of lightning. But the dark horse of this year, Leo Flu, could not be done, as during the entrance exam. Students chatted incessantly, But the professor said that it was time to start a race, the results of which everyone would accept with dignity. Celia strained. She knew better than others about the problems of a cousin with an aura, so she did not believe in his victory. Nevertheless, deep down, she hoped that this time Leo would make the impossible. The professor gave the go ahead, and the guys ran forward to the finish line. This time, Duran was determined to win, whatever it was, but Leo was not going to give in. He also began to use the aura, though he was still a little behind the enemy. Students really liked watching the competition, since they did not expect less from Dueling. Compared to him, Leo was very bad in the use of a step of the aura. Observing this picture, many had the question of why Flu became the old first-year-old. The only one who openly showed sympathy and faith in Leo was Chelsea. Meanwhile, Duran became faster and faster every second. Sadly, but Duran had already managed to overcome half the way, which did not please Carl. Here, already the most important hero, it became clear that he would lose at this pace, so he began to think about changing the victory plan on the move. An unexpected idea came into his bright head, and the guy braked sharply, changing the vector of his movement. After which he ran to the wall of the training ground at all pairs. No one could understand what this feint means, including Celia, watched this in a silent shock. Meanwhile, Leo, using the flame of graters, broke away from the ground and jumped onto the wall. Now, from a decent height, he watched his opponent approaching the finish line. It was not fatal, because it was time to fulfill the second part of the plan. For this, he sent all the power of flame to his feet. He broke away from the support, and adding his maximum acceleration, he darted forward with a fiery stream. Feeling something was amiss, Duran looked around to check what was happening behind him. The explosion, he did not expect a fiery tornado to see there. The fire was hidden by the body of the protagonist, and everyone could only distinguish between his silhouette in a fiery tornado. Flying over Duran, Leo did not miss the opportunity to clarify him, saying that he would be the first in any case. And these were not empty words, since he landed precisely at the finish line first. The instant lightning of Duran evaporated, as if there were no, and he was already reaching the finish line, not understanding how this could happen. Leo did not humiliate him, but on the contrary, silently and fervently smiled at the enemy. Classmates of the guys were long under the impression of what they saw. All the question tormented everyone how the main character was able to overtake the fastest student of this year, despite the fact that he had never studied the step of the aura before. But they were wrong, and only Celia realized what happened, because her cousin used the aura, but the step of the phoenix. The only one who did not care how Leo won was Chelsea and Carl. They simply rejoiced for him with all their hearts. Meanwhile, Ain was still in no hurry to comment on the competition, but silently analyzed everything he saw. So Duran used the branded lightning of his family, so he reached phenomenal speed. But Leo, although he was many times slower, but at the same time he controlled the power of his attribute much better and was more skillful to control it. After the competition, Leo turned to Duran and thanked him for the race. He was sure that if we were talking about a long distance, the result could be different. But Duran did not appreciate his impulse, pushed and left. Obviously that he did not know how to lose. The professor looked at it through his fingers because he realized that Arvi had a real hero in this generation. Duran and his insults were not interested in Chelsea, who hurried to Leo and asked him to train her because she wants to be like him. This even offended Carl, since he did not understand why the girl admires the main character so much, and he of the other way was no worse than his friend. But then he waved his hand and called his friends in a cafe and offered to pay even an account as a sign of their eternal friendship and victory. The proposal was, of course, tempting, but Leo could not go with friends today since he still had business. Then he hurried to the exit from the training ground because he was already late for classes on a call. Friends were perplexed why the night of classes on the call. Leo thought that perhaps in these classes he would be able to understand why King Fei gave him only an oath of allegiance. There were too many questions in the head of the protagonist. He did not understand why he received a useful reward for the prudent, despite the fact that Professor Arvi was an ordinary magician unrelated with an appeal. In addition, to conclude a contract with a fairy, Leo had to get into the lands of fairies, so now the reward received was useless. The guy was so immersed in his thoughts that he did not immediately notice that not only he came to classes. In the forefront, Chen Xia came to the introductory task, who was glad to see the guy here. In truth, the girl did not quite understand that the guy forgot here, because she was sure that he was only interested in knightly business. Since the conversation was very friendly, so Chen was not afraid to show Leo of her spirit with whom she concluded a contract. But the young man had nothing to show since he had not yet concluded a magical contract with anyone, so the girl offered him her help, in which case Leo happily decided to accept her at the right moment, but now he was curious how many a girl was. She did not hide her age and said that she was 17. Involuntarily, he mentally compared Chelsea and Chen and came to the conclusion that she did not look 17 years old. From her strength, she could be given 15. The girl immediately realized that Leo was thinking about something strange, although he began to deny everything. The situation was funny, but Chen decided to change the subject and said that she really liked the guy with Dueling. It was he who made the girl think about the fact that it was time for her to become stronger, and when this would happen, she hoped that Leo would accept her challenge. Leo could not refuse her so sincerely. After some time, other students began to approach the clearing at the clearing. But even with the best counting of people, the cat cried. Chen was not surprised, since the call was not particularly popular among students. Everything was clear with this, but why conduct a lesson in the open air? But a minute later, he realized why this was done when a black wyvern landed in the clearing. True, the creature was not hostile, but very friendly, sniffing a frightened student. The mistress of wyverns did not like that the student dared to drive her animal, which showed respect for him. Unraveling was not only the mistress of wyverns, but also a professor on a call that will train freshmen. The woman was so beautiful that the guys did not even listen to her further, but only drooling on her figure. Even Leo appreciated her external data in dignity, realizing that if his friend was his friend here, he would have gone crazy when he saw her. A few minutes later, the appeal began. The woman understood that the newcomers had talent since they came here. Since everyone answered her quite vigorously, then it was time to start the practical part of their lesson. The release of Carl came, who was the second first-year teacher. The man brought the griffin into the clearing. So the students had to break into pairs and learn to ride on griffins. For some students, this task immediately became a problem as they first contacted the griffins. But such a remark of the guys angered a woman, since she did not tolerate disrespect for her teaching methods. If someone did not like something, then she did not hold anyone in her classes. Everyone could leave if he was uncertain in their abilities. Then she saddled her wyvern and soared into the sky. Leo watched with interest the show, preparing to accept the challenge of the teacher. Carlo decided to smooth out sharp corners, who peacefully asked the students to complete the task of Yuri. This helped, and the students began taming the griffins. Suddenly Chen approached Leo and asked him to allow her to manage the creature during the flight. He was not opposed. So they managed to saddle the griffin and fly after the professor while everything went very smoothly. No one expected that immediately, in the first lesson, they would fly on griffins. These emotions were difficult to describe, and everyone wanted to get a piece of happiness, controlling the creature. Chen admitted that at the very beginning she was very worried, but now she calmed down and rejoiced. But Leo felt that somewhere there was a catch, so he did not lose his vigilance. And this time the guy was not mistaken again as Yura took out a whistle. Without warning anyone, the woman blew into a whistle. This changed everything. The most kind griffins in the world, as it has gone crazy, as soon as the sound would touch their ears. They screamed, stood on his hind legs. In a word, they became uncontrollable. Now it became clear that it was the professor who controlled the griffin, not students. So now the moment has come when everyone had to show their abilities. Otherwise, they should leave the academy. It was easier to say what to do. Chen was nervous and did not know how to force her to obey her again. Seeing the hopelessness of the situation, Leo decided to take everything into his own hands, saying that the griffins are very proud creatures, so it would not work out by force. Meanwhile, the hand of the young man was over Chen's hand, which was very embarrassing her, since she did not understand how to react to this. Leo pretended not to understand what she was talking about, while leaning toward her ear, and penetrately said that she would do everything like him. The girl closed her eyes and surrendered to the mercy of the main character, who was confident in herself and did not allow them to die from the loss of control of the griffin. It was a victory, as the professor noted their beautiful efforts to herself. But this woke up a keen interest in her, so Yura asked her assistant about what was known about Leo. He replied that the guy was submitted to the nightly department. It was strange, and it was strange that he was not from a well-known family, which means they certainly did not have a home griffin at home. But this was already interesting, because it meant that the guy had an innate talent of the inviter. Moreover, they fell into their hands a real precious stone. Having overcome difficulties, the students reached the training site on the island of the Call, and now came to their senses. While classmates were bad, Leo began to walk around and consider what grew there. Once no one forbade, the guy decided to disrupt and eat a giant overseas fruit, when suddenly a slightly charred feather of bird fell on him. It is curious, but the guy could not think about it for a long time since Chen hurried to him. The girl thought that the guy was loafing, and he carefully fed their hypogriff fruit. This break ended, and the second part of the practical lesson began. There would be no silence, but there was a student who did not want to agree with such a course of an introductory lesson. Yura was not going to regret anyone, because the call of the callers was more complicated than that of other units, and this had to be understood from the very beginning. For a callus for usual control over mana is not enough, and only those people who have a predisposition can conclude a contract with the spirit. And in order to command them, a tamer is needed. Summarizing the above, it turns out that there were always fewer heroes prisoners than everyone else. But those heroes who achieve unity with summon are able to do great deeds. The professor's motivational speech was beautiful, but Elsa Georgian was more interesting. What was the essence of the second part of their practical lesson? It was the right attitude, so Yura went to the point, saying that this was not a simple island, but the island of Simonov. A huge number of summons lived on this island, which were considered the main weapon of the callers, and the task should show how good the tamers are. So, each newcomer had to find summon, tame it, and bring it to show the teacher. After taming and concluding the contract, they could leave the tame summons for themselves. To many, the conditions of the task seemed simple and very pleasant, so they rushed to the forest to complete the task. Leo did not show such agility and was very in no hurry. At that moment, Elsa approached him. She had already heard about his victory over Duran, so she was wondering why he decided to attend classes on a call. Chen and Walden also pricked ears. The answer was not long in coming. The guy believed that since he was the best, he should succeed not only in fencing, but also in other disciplines. Yura, who watched the dialogue, noticed that it was these young people that would become the backbone of the future generation of heroes. Meanwhile, the taming of summons was in full swing. One of the students tried to make contact with proud and beautiful deer. Leo walked past them without looking around, since it was extremely banal, in his modest opinion. There were those who prefer small and cute as large summons. This option also did not fit the main character, so he went into the depths of the forest in proud loneliness. He did not think that the call was simple, but he needed a place where there was no extra eyes in order to check one theory. After that, he took a feather from his uniform with his uniforms, with the edges scorched. And then magic happened. Streams of fire danced around the guy, and the feather turned into ashes, confirming his most bold conjecture. Although even Leo was surprised when he felt the appearance of a mystical creature. Meanwhile, the guy's parents arranged a romantic picnic in nature, though Ryan was worried that nothing was irreparable to the academy with her son. Dad was also configured more calmly and did not understand over his wife's experiences because he believed that everything would be fine with their son. Only in fact, everything was far from easy, and a wall of fire appeared in front of the guy, which marked the appearance of the legendary mystical creature, Phoenix. Phoenix immediately recognized Leo child Reina, since he smelled of his mother's flame. For the guy, it was a surprise that such a powerful and rare creature knew his mother. Of course, the Phoenix could not be mistaken, because if Reina had a child, then he would be about the same age with the boy. No less interesting was the fact that Farina considered herself the debtor of the Rhine. So Leo and Farina met. The guy was curious how his mother could help Phoenix so that she considered herself her debtor. It turned out that Ryan saved the life of Ellen Lunda, the calling of Farina. At that time, Ellen went to clear one dungeon, and at first everything went smoothly. But then the situation changed, and all her comrades died, and her life was in the balance of death. And at the moment when the girl was already saying goodbye to her life, the Rhine appeared in the dungeon and saved her. But everything has a price, and the mother of Leo lost her fiery aura. The main character immediately became sad because he realized that if not for the case, his mother would become a full-fledged hero. Farina was not surprised when she found out that Reina had never regretted her act. She was such a knight. The boy wanted to know how Phoenix ended up in Lumen, but the creature could not reveal this secret. But she was wondering that the knight forgot in the classroom lessons. Leo did not consider something special that he was attending these lessons. Interestingly, so Farina looked at the guy more carefully, and at a short moment, it seemed to her that she sees Kyle in him, so she considered his appearance on this island fate. In addition, for her personally, his arrival was an excellent opportunity to repay the duty of the Rhine. Leo just stood and was silent because for the first time in his life he did not know what to say. Suddenly, Finir asked the young man to reach out and accept a small gift. After a moment, an egg appeared in the guy's hand from the fire of Phoenix, in which there was a child of the Finrus. Once when the main character becomes a great callingman, he will certainly conclude a contract with her child. Leo did not understand why he would wait for an eternity when you can do everything right now. Farina strained, as she understood that it was still too early, and a lot could go wrong, and the guy losing his life. But the protagonist, as always, had his own opinion, so he called his flame. The fire of the graters began to absorb into the middle of the Phoenix egg. The determination of the guy and his confidence in his own abilities reminded Fear in Rhine, so she sincerely wished him good luck. Suddenly it became dark around, and Leo soared in zero gravity next to a bright cluster of flame. Instinctively, he held out his hand to the flame and touched him. In the same instant, the body of a young man enveloped the fire. Leo made his breath difficult. Now he perfectly understood the nature of Phoenix flame. To radiate such heat, the phoenixes burn every day, experiencing incredible torment. Leo was not afraid anymore, he understood, accepted and shared the pain of the phoenix, which every day passed through this flower alone. After that, the fire began to subside and retreat. Moreover, the shell on the egg began to crack. If at first it was one crack, now it is all covered with them. Although the guy was tired, he achieved his goal, which struck the Finir into the very heart. Phoenix admitted that she met a real genius of call, and over time, there will be no heroes in this. And the next instant in the hands of the guy was a Phoenix chick named Fiora. But Leo was a little surprised, since he represented the children of the Phoenix differently, and this one looked like a chicken. Even the sounds that Phoenix made were similar to chicken, but he was cute. Meanwhile, students began to demolish creatures into the clearing, whom they tamed for verification to the professor. Most of them have already coped with the task. Carlo said that 5 minutes were left until the end of the practice. Yura was looking forward to the appearance of the last 4 students. A huge bear fled at her, and Chen-Shi sat on him. The professor was pleasantly surprised by her choice of Sumon. The surprises did not end there, and everyone raised their heads into the sky, where another student appeared. Walden showed the highest aerobatics as he managed to tame the shadow raven. True, the guy admitted that while he was not able to conclude a contract with the creature, nevertheless, the professor was pleasantly surprised. Elsa went further into the forest, and there she was able to find the snake gorgon, with whom she concluded a contract because there were no such creatures in their family. At that moment, Carlos said that the time of the lesson was expired, and the last student was already coming ahead of the clearing. And really on the horizon appeared the figure of Leo. Against the background of the rest, his phoenix, under the code name of the chicken, looked poor, and classmates began to laugh at him. Only Yura in this small being, which was sitting on the head of the protagonist, recognized the cub of the phoenix. To date, classes were completed, and Leo finally ended up in his dorm room, but he only dreamed of peace, so he was going to meet. So, in her office for a personal conversation, Leo was waiting for Professor Yura, who thoughtfully studied the documents. The professor came off the papers and asked the young man to boldly pass and take up free place in an armchair. She admitted that for her today was a special day, as for the callingman, since for the first time she saw the phoenix chick. In truth, she had no idea that these creatures live on that island, but here Leo tensed a little, not understanding what she was sliding for. It all came down to the fact that in the history of the Academy today, the newcomer was able to conclude a contract with a mystical creature for the first time on the first day of study. Now the main character began to understand that something was a little strange and tried to squeeze into a chair. Professor Yura did not listen to him. She stared at him, saying that it seems that she knows who he was really. The smell of fried, although Leo hoped that the professor was not so insightful as to understand who he was. In this he was right, and Yura simply considered him a genius of call and began to hug him tightly for joy. For outstanding successes in this area, the woman wanted to reward him, though she believed that so far people should not know that he had concluded a contract with a phoenix chick for security purposes. After all, if other students learn about this, then an unnecessary hype rises to anyone. She squeezed the shoulder of the protagonist and believed that when introductory classes end, he would choose a call as the main direction of study. On this note, their meeting ended, and Chloe was walking along the corridor of the academy. The girl was tired and sleepy, so she sneezed, and classmates made fun of her because of this. And in the forefront was Carl, though he did it kindly, even though Chloe did not understand his humor because she read classical literature until late and was a diligent student. Leo did not pay attention to their dispute, and then he turned to the girl himself. And then he took out her documents from his pocket and handed it to her. Chloe's cheeks were covered with a blush as she remembered an awkward situation that occurred not so long ago in the city. She took the document, and the three of them went into the classroom. Carl did not expect that Leo would be recorded for magic lessons, but he wanted to try everything, so he calmly took up free space. Settler, Carl shared his information with him that Chloe marks first in the class of magic. In addition, he did not really like this girl, so he decided to move away. Such a clear neglect of her special girl did not endure, so she used her magic on Grief Student. Then she informed the guy that or not she wanted, and he would sit with her on the first desk, no matter how Carl rests, and Chloe was stronger. At that moment, Leo was called, and when he turned his head to the sound, he saw his brother and sister Revelin. A moment later, Professor Glenn Holmes entered the office, who will train freshmen of magic. In truth, he was a beautiful man, so the girls raised the noise in the audience. But before the start of the main classes, he prepared something for students. It was worth clicking his fingers. Magical signs appeared in the audience. So with the help of magic, he handed out students with written tasks that they had to solve. All concerned the theory of magic. Thus, he wanted to check the level of their knowledge, since those who do not meet his standards will have to leave his course. In his understanding, students of the Lumen Academy must cope with such tasks at a time. At the end of the test, students will have to hand over the sheets with ready-made work. The assistant professor will have to be handed over. Time went on. Leo, as soon as I looked at the tasks, immediately covered with cold later, because I did not expect such difficult questions. Students worked in silence, considering formulas and tasks. Time quickly flew forward, and there were fewer and fewer minutes to solve problems. The test ended. The students did not expect that most of the tasks would be simple, though they could not answer the last question. Unlike others, the main character was able to solve only one magic problem. He was very ashamed of that he had so badly studied modern magical theories. Leaving the class, the guy understood that he would not go further with such a result, so he was going to study the magic on his own further. Meanwhile, Glenn began to look at the work of students. He was sad to look at the level of the magicians of our time. since now it was enough to know only the principles of activation. In parallel, he distributed work to students who did not look happy, seeing their results. Therefore, he decided to show freshmen what real magic is. For this, he began the process of activating his own magic. A complex magic formula appeared in the air. With every minute, everything became complicated, while filled with streams of different colors. Students in amazement watched the essence of the magic of the professor. Professor Glenn personally created this miracle from the beginning to the very end, so he wanted his students could also create such miracles. Therefore, he today conducted a theoretical test. In the test work, 49 questions were 1 point and are based on the simple memorization of information. And only the last question was 50, 1 score, since it concerned the true essence of magic and its understanding. Now Chelsea understood why she could not give him the right answer. She became sadder when she saw that Leo gave up, and she so wanted to attend joint classes with him. Suddenly, an assistant came to Professor Glenn and reported some information. It turned out that this year was a student who was able to answer the last question. The mood of the professor immediately improved. He even began to laugh. With a frantic excitement, the man began to demand that the student who answered the last question get up immediately. But no one has yet stood up. And Anna tried to convey to the man the idea that the student did not score the highest score, but that was all the same, since he answered correctly to the most important question. Only sometime it came to Glenn that the student answered the right question only to one question, but he did not know all the rest. Even so, the professor wanted to know the name of this unicum, so he began to read his personal information. Glenn called Leo again, but no one got up. Carl and Chloe looked at each other. They realized that the guy had gone before the announcement of the results. At that moment, Chelsea raised her hand and said that Leo Flew left the audience, immediately after the work for the check. The main character sat in a cafe with Celia, which was flooded with laughter, because she did not expect a cousin to answer only one question of a written test. The girl was losing her ice cream and realized that the cousin was moving somewhere in the wrong place, because at first he called the chicken at the class lessons. Now he completely failed the test of magic. One of this conclusion was 1. The guy needs to be engaged exclusively with fencing and become a first-class knight. Suddenly, behind Leo, the evil Professor Glenn materialized, who did not expect a student who correctly answered the most difficult question would prefer the knightly unit. Was the test so simple that it was not necessary to wait for the results? Leo got up and tried to explain to the professor that there was a misunderstanding, since he was sure that he had false-up the test. All questions except the latter, Leo called too complicated, so he was able to answer only the last. Then the professor plunged into a shock state. In general, the main character studied magic on his own outdated books, so he does not understand modern formulas. Glenn could no longer restrain his emotions, so he lifted the guy up like a fluff. Leo did not understand what was happening here now, and that the professor had thought of it. The magician no longer hid his happiness and joy, so he was going to drag a young man with him. Thus, Glenn grabbed Leo by the scruff and dragged him in an unknown direction, leaving Celia in complete bewilderment. The girl understood that different personalities were taught at the academy, but she did not expect to see one. At that moment, Anna ran up to her. The assistant hoped very much that her boss did not manage to get things. She hoped in vain, since the magician, without hesitation, grabbed Leo and dragged it to it is not clear where. The day promised to be cheerful. The girl ran after the professor, as she was worried that he could learn something. Meanwhile, Glenn dragged Leo in the audience, drew different formulas and tasks on the board, and asked the protagonist to solve them. The young man silently began to fulfill the task, and the professor hoped that the young man solved the last task not by chance, but had certain knowledge regarding the understanding of magic. Now Glenn wanted to dispel all his doubts and see what this guy is capable of. In less than 10 minutes, the protagonist solved a magical problem. Moreover, the professor did not see on the board algorithms for solving the problem. He realized that the student decided everything in his mind. Glenn was incredibly glad that over many years of teaching, he found a student who understood the depth of magic. Meanwhile, the corridor of the academy was walking, unusual at a. In vain he curled up here, since a stunned Glenn fled to meet him. Such a sight obviously inspired the harsh professor. Unfortunately, Arva did not work out the escape from the prefixing Professor Glenn, since he grabbed his leg and began to thank him cordially. This is not the first time Arva had to witness such an eccentric behavior of Professor Glenn, but today he surpassed himself, so Arvi lifted him with magic into the air. But Glenn was still in his strange situation, because on the recommendation of Arvi, the brilliant student of Leo Flo appeared his class. Now Arvi was also intrigued. He believed that Leo was an ordinary knight, but it turned out, a magician. Professor Glenn believed that he was obliged to make a first-class magician with Leo and not allow such a brilliant mind to disappear while the student would wave a wooden stick. Finally, Anna reached the professors, not Professor Arvi lowered to Paul Professor Glenn. The woman managed to catch a man at the last minute and not to let himself his back, but he did not care. For the sake of his main task, he saw, prevent the knights from destroying Leo's talent. Nevertheless, he thanked Anna for his help and devotion. In fact, she was afraid that one day she could not restrain emotions and kill the professor, and now she asked him to return to the students in class. Suddenly, Arvi noted the movement behind his back with a lateral vision. Leo approached him. He did not manage to tell the professor, nevertheless, he concluded that all the magicians at this academy were not from this world. Arvi pretended that he did not notice the protagonist, turned away, and went in the opposite direction. Exactly a week has passed since the student arrived at the Lumen Academy. The introductory classes were over, and Leo rested, reading the book. The guy tried to recognize information about Kyle by hook or by crook, but there was not a share of truth in this book. This upset the young man, but at the same time made me think about why in all the negative opinion about Kyle. Meanwhile, 3 professors fled to the director's office. Callian broke away from filling out documents, not understanding what reason was the entire fuss. Leo became a stumbling block, since he wanted to study in all 3 directions, believing that he could have time everywhere. But it was an unprecedented case for their academy, so all 3 professors argued where the guy should study. This is not to say that the director was very surprised at this state of things. This reminded him of an effective hero, whom everyone tried to forget about. The professors were confused because they did not quite understand what the director says, so the man had to start a mini-lecture about who Kyle is. It turned out to be the 5th hero of the source. But the most interesting was that this guy was the only hero of all 3 types. Meanwhile, at the training ground, Leo conducted the training of Celia and Chelsea. The girls ran a marathon and were very tired. Carl watched all this and did not understand why the girls are shining of their legitimate output training. It so turned out that one day Chelsea went to Leo and asked him to train her on the weekend, but the question remained open, where the weapons and why the girls were just running. Now the presence of weapons did not matter, since it was more important to train endurance. This lesson of Celia has already learned. Chelsea at least barely stood on her feet, but also believed that endurance was of paramount importance for the combat magician, so she asked Carl not to interfere with her to run. Finally, the time has come to make a short pause in training, so the girls gathered around Leo, who handed the cousin a bottle of water. At this moment, Chelsea, who showed a note of sympathy for a young man, asked him to run with her, not understanding what she signed. Hearing such a bold statement, Celia leaned with water. But the main character was not at all opposed to running both with Chelsea and Kuzina. All the same, a joint training entered his plans, while Celia wanted to politely refuse. Watching this picture, Carl inserted his 5 kopecks. Initially, he thought that Leo and Celia were a couple, but now he was not sure of that, although he did not understand, so they got along well. The girl was offended by such assumptions, so she had to tell that she and Leo are a cousin and sister. On this note, the clarification of family ties and rest was over. The main character became from the grass and said that the time has come for a real dinner. But Carl was not going to bother. He wanted to go to the city and unwind a little. Celia also wanted to go for a walk to the city, but Leo dragged her with him to training. The distribution day has come. Not the students gathered in the assembly surrendered and waited for the result. Leo was no exception, because when he recognized his result, he immediately went to class. There, the main character was waiting for Carl, who called him to his desk. Leo was a little surprised that a friend knew in which class he would fall. The company was tired of Chelsea. Nevertheless, she found the strength to say hello to the main character. Looking at the girl, Carl did not understand, suddenly a whole weekend. But Leo, without a twinge of conscience, said that he pulled the foundations with her. Suddenly, senior students appeared on the horizon. They were curious. Only the youngest would survive this year, since they fell into the class of suffering. The guys changed sharply in their faces, as they heard a professor's voice behind him, who did not promise them anything good. The worst voice was his expression on his face, which said that the man was ready to kill. For disrespect for his beloved person, Edmund decided to punish her senior students. For this, they had to accept the pose of the bridge. The guys could not object to him, and a minute later they took the pose of the bridge, while the professor slowly approached them. The man sat down on the backs of the students and began his lecture with what he informed everyone. This is a class of losers who scored the least points in the entrance exams. In addition, he was sure that everyone in the classroom knew who he was and what his teaching methods he had. The students did not know only one thing: why this particular professor was appointed them to the class teacher. Carl suggested that in this way everyone wanted to increase students' performance in this class. Herod did not expect another response from the typical representative of the losers. While the rest of the students came to their senses, Chelsea tried to answer the next question of the professor. She suggested that the debt of the student of the Academy Lumen was to conquer the world of heroes through practical missions. The girl was right, but the problem was that Herod saw in front of him weaknesses who could soon become corpses and drag their comrades down, and not conquer the world of heroes. He took over the supervision of this class in order to make the heroes from them or send it back. Suddenly, the professor turned his attention to Leo, realizing that only he could survive in a real battle. True, the expression on the face of the protagonist did not express any emotions. He simply stared at the man. The surprises did not end there for this. Herod ordered them to quickly change into a sports uniform and go to the training ground. At the landfill, everyone built in quietly and waited for further instructions, what their first combat test would be about. There was nothing clear, except that they had an impudent class teacher who was sitting under an umbrella and drank juice. Herod was curious. Did one of his new students think that he can save someone in a cruel world where life comes by clicking his fingers and also disappears? Nellie Carvin did not understand. The professor was driving him because she was taught that during the battle, every self-respecting knight should help his associates. It was extremely naive to think in this way, because only a truly strong hero could not only overcome all the dangers, but also think about helping comrades. Besides, the professor did not understand what the girl took, what could help someone. Suddenly, another student, who was confident in her abilities, intervened in this small dialogue. If so, the professor asked the girl to create a fireball. Eileen immediately began to complete the task. She got a good fireball. The ball did not impress the professor, since he believed that even an ant is impossible to kill with such a ball. The remark only raised the student, so she decided to invest a little more mana in her fireball. Now the wandering around her blazed fire, and in her hands the girl held 2 fireballs the size of a football ball. Herod admitted that this demonstration looked very impressive. To have a large supply of mana, this was one story, to be able to use it correctly. The other, so the professor decided to call his assistant spirit. Elaine had to get into him with his fiery ball. A moment later, a small and brisk assistant professor appeared before the students. Another moment and the spirit was next to the girl. Unlike his master, the assistant was still that mischievous and prankster, so he touched the student for her sweet nose. With his behavior, he very much angered Elaine. In a fit of anger, the girl began to throw her fireballs into him. Only not one of them has reached its dodgy small goal. The spirit beautifully and gracefully dodged all the fireballs directed into it. This went on for some time, until the spirit returned to his master. The professor arranged this test for that. The students realized they did not have enough effectiveness to use their skills. The lesson did not end there. The professor informed his students that no one would go home until he caught his silt, so he wished everyone good luck. Oddly enough, Leo agreed with Herod. Although the manner of whose speech seemed to be Hamavata, he looked into the root of the problem. Since the situation accepted a similar revolution, well, the main character decided to intervene, so he ran to catch Sylph. It was just that, and his professor was looking forward to. Herod was curious. Leo is as empty as a fictitious hero Kyle, or his complete opposite. Meanwhile, the pursuit of Sylph was in full swing, but no one managed to catch him. The spirit was more agile than all the students combined. But not everything was lost, since Leo Foe entered the game, who with his feet with the help of a fire aura, he darted towards a Sylph at the speed of light. The guy was extremely concentrated and carried forward, focusing his attention to the goals, while at the same time the professor thought that perhaps the first real station wagon in all 3 directions appeared in their academy. Meanwhile, Carl and Chelsea had already practically swollen. They did not understand how to catch such a quick and dodgy creature. While others spoke and spared themselves, the main character used the step of the aura and was getting closer to his goal. The protagonist's plan was to rise to a certain height and from there to dive from there. Thus the Sylph will have fun and will not notice Leo's approach. The calculation was absolutely correctly made, and the guy separated a few centimeters from Sylph when the spirit noticed him. It's a shame, but the main character also missed and could not catch the spirit at the first attempt. Nevertheless, he did not sprinkle his head with ashes, but conjured a thin rope of fire, which clung to the leg of the spirit. Only this small line managed to use, as it is not clear where Duran came from, and grabbed the spirit. The task was completed, and both guys were on the ground. At that moment, Professor Seaton approached Duran and praised him for a well-completed work, focusing on the fact that they have something to learn from Professor Herod. Herod leaned back in an armchair, began to pull the juice. They say that he does not mind if his colleagues take his studies and his students. In the expression on Sedenen's face, it was obvious that he was counting on a completely different effect of his words. Carl carefully brought every word of Professor's and was completely delighted that he witnessed this scene, since the rest of the Academy professors appreciated Herod and Seaton. In general, the guy considered himself a specialist in collecting information, so now he was trying to impress Nellie, while Chelsea had a complete disgust for him. Meanwhile, Professor Seaton tried to hurt Professor Herod. They say he does not understand why his colleague took care of the class of losers. Catching the ball with one hand, the man said that he would soon receive an answer to his question. Thus, he requested permission for a joint competition between their 2 classes. Namely, the teams will play the ancient game of the Lumen, Bastards Academy. This idea seemed to Professor Herod very good, since there is no better way to teach heroes than a direct clash with the enemy. In addition, the man would still win his team or lose. The main thing is that someone else would continue the lesson for him. The most offensive was that every time at the end of the year, Seaton lost according to the estimates of the performance of his students to Professor Herod. Seaton went to his class. Herod called his students and said that he was offering them an ideal opportunity to develop their skills in real time, playing basters. In addition, they did not have the right to lose because if they lose, then all to one will be expelled from the academy. It was the most unexpected turn of events that knocked out the soil from under the feet of students. At heart, the guys hoped that Herod was joking, because in a parallel class, there were as many as 3 top students, so they could not win a priori with them. Only now the professor was absolutely serious. He didn't care how they would win. The main thing is that they would do it. In addition, he did not understand why they were so stressful. After all, if you think about it, then they had an ace in the sleeve, namely Leo, the headman of all freshmen. The main character had to gather a team of 6 people. In fact, the guy understood that Herod was experiencing him. But this was not from personal hostility, but rather due to the fact that many students break after the first week of study at the academy. So, the professor decided to use it in order to give self-confidence to all his classmates loser, so that they continue to study and not abandon. Meanwhile, Professor Sengen prepared a training ground for playing basters. The time has come to play. It is not surprising that Durin and Celia participated in the enemy team. They should have opposed Leo, along with Carl and Chelsea. Leo quickly considered Chelsea and the rest the reaction, while he did not understand why they were so tensed. The girl suggested that the guy had no idea what the Buster game is, so she explained to him that it was not just a game, but a fighting one. Carl inserted his 5 cents, saying that this is the most dangerous of all existing games. According to the reaction of the rivals, Celia decided that they had reconciled with their inevitable defeat. This was not so, because Chelsea would die better than lose to one of the graders. At this moment, Leo acquired the girl and Carl, saying that they would not be worried, since they will not lose in this competition. Celia did not understand where her cousin got so much self-confidence. Nevertheless, she was determined to show him the result of her exhausting training. Approximately the same was configured her classmate, the Huda Miley. A few minutes passed, and Professor Seaton invited both teams to take positions in the arena. Now, the main character had a choice of whom to take the team, so he so far offered classmates to decide it on their own. So, the first to volunteer Chelsea and Elin, who wanted to prove to the professor that they were not so bad, as well as wipe their nose to rivals from an elite class. Nellie also timidly raised her hand to participate in the game. Meanwhile, Carr tried to hide behind his classmate, but Leo noticed him and said that the guy was also involved in the game. In such a simple way, the main character gathered himself a team for playing basters. So the game began, and Leo carefully watched the ball. Duran answered him the same, because this time he was going to take a revenge. The guys at the same time rushed to the ball, but Duran was faster than Leo for a split second. Therefore, Moira was able to touch the ball first. Then he grabbed the object and jumped onto the field. Leo did not like this, so he needed to find out from classmates the rules of this game in order to prevent mistakes anymore. The essence of the game was that the player had to fill the ball with his aura and throw him into the enemy's ring, while not touching him with his hands and feet. The one who will make 2 positive moves will win. Although Tid said that the rules are simple, it would be more difficult to achieve the result than Leo thought. Meanwhile, Carl prepared to take the ball, which was about to throw Dwarin into it. And now the guy filled the ball with his aura and launched it into the gates of his opponents. Looking at the object flying directly at himself, similar to the cannon core, Leo realized that he could not stop him. The only thing he could do so as not to cripple was to use the step of the aura and leave the line of defeat. Meanwhile, the ball flew in a centimeter from Carl's head and fell right into their gates, frightening him in earnest the guy. Diren's classmates shouted with admiration, watching his confident actions. But the classmates of Leo himself were drooping, anticipating the long sad wires home. Tid also worried that their chances of victory were melting before our eyes, and the possibility of exception was getting closer. The time has come to change the strategy, so Leo asked the Soko Mannik how else you can earn glasses in this game. There were glasses if the ball flies out of the line during the enemy's throw. The second way was that someone could intercept the flying ball of the enemy. Suddenly, the guys heard Nellie's cry, who warned of danger. The guys immediately turned their heads towards the girl. At that moment, they saw the ball hit the Alina right. This time, the glasses for her team earned a Celia, which did not understand how someone could be distracted during the basters. Elena was alive after the ball, and relatively well. It was obvious that she was very painful. Suddenly, Tid remembered that there was another way to earn points in this game, namely to disable the enemy with the help of a direct hit of the ball. To do this, it was possible to use only the ball, arms, legs, or something else was strictly prohibited. Leo thanked the classmate for the information. Now he decided for himself what to do and reached for the ball. Now it was his turn to open an account in the game. Meanwhile, the professors watched the course of the game from a secluded place, with a beautiful look. Satan believed that his team would win, since they had Celia Zerdinger, whose attribute was a fire, which was best combined with the game of Baster. The only thing the man did not understand was why his colleague agreed to this competition, knowing that he has a trump card, Celia. Suddenly Herod interrupted him, and reminded the first student of his colleague. Even after so many years, Seiden could not forget the queen of the game of the bastards from the house of Zergdingers. It's good that the man remembered the girl, because now her son studied in Herod's class. Now it was the turn of Seiden to inhale several times and exhale, since he realized that it was still not decided for sure. Meanwhile, Leo classmates continued to regret themselves. But Celia felt that the real game was just beginning, since Leo finally gathered his thoughts. And the truth now, Leo resembled the fiery godbuster. At the same instant, he rushed to the attack. His throw was accurate, strong, and fiery beautiful right into the enemy's goal. But Chloe took and spoiled everything, erecting a wall of ice in front of the gate in the last second. The girl believed that while she was standing at the gate, Leo could never score a goal. Only now, when he caught up with her, her confidence evaporated somewhere. In vain, Chloe thought that such a trick could hold the protagonist. He jumped up without a doubt, striving to finish the begun. Then he directly pressed the ball into the ice with his fist. A huge hole was formed in the ice wall, and the ball with the speed of light flew into the gate. It seemed that for Chloe at that moment the whole world collapsed, and not its ice wall. Professor Seiden looked incorrectly at the arena. He understood that the natural instinct of Leo was phenomenal in battle. Herod only smiled slyly. After the first earned point, the students of the class of losers believed in themselves and began to support Leo and the rest of the guys. It seems that Professor Seiden began to understand what his colleague achieved. The game with every minute became more dangerous and spectacular. Celia entered the rage, and her attacks became much stronger than she brought Carl almost to tears when she launched another ball flies into the gate. Oddly enough, or Chelsea's games also became more confident, the girl began to use her wind magic more effectively. At this moment, Dua brought out Tidid's exact hit. Leo answered the enemy's team mirroring, disabling one of their player. There was a score 9-10 in favor of the Duran team, and Chloe bravely defended its gates. Meanwhile, Duran was about to score another ball into the gates of the main character's team. He filled the ball with an aura and launched his enemy gates. Carl did not know to try to stop the attack or fall to the ground, fleeing. For the first time in the whole game, the guy gained courage and caught a flying ball. The guy did everything he could to win his team, but his mother was running out, so he left, leaving everything else on Leo. The girls led him to the infirmary, and the protagonist was left with opponents. The situation was not simple since the account was equal and the number of players did not, but Leo did not give up, but already took the ball for attack. Obviously, the team of Duran had an advantage, but the main character did not look depressed. On the contrary, he evaluated how to score the ball. Chloe also looked really decisively. She admitted that she did not have enough knowledge of the magical theory, but she was not going to play the player in this game. After that, she created several of her clones to close the gaps in their defense. Thus, the enemy's team was now in full force, and Leo had to come up with how to get around them all. Celia and Dwarren have already prepared for the attack of the protagonist. At this moment, the young man came up with the most important idea that he could be capable of. Suddenly, having put only a small effort, the main character disappeared from the sight of the opponents. Celia, Chloe, and Dwarren were extremely surprised by the high speed of Leo's movement. Meanwhile, the guy in some way magically flew past the cousin, who did not even notice his approach, and was able to react only when he was at a decent distance from her. Chloe defended the gate, trying to understand which of the mirror illusions was the real Leo. Suddenly for herself, the girl realized that she was in front of her unusual mirror magic, and something more special. She was so fascinated that she missed the decisive ball that fell into their gate. Chloe's surprise grew into shock as Leo used the magic of stars. Now she was tormented by the question of how an ordinary person could use an elven spell. Meanwhile, the professor announced that the Leo team won in this small tournament, which inspired his entire class. The guys hugged and even cried as they understood that they would not go home, and no one would exclude Lumen from the academy today. Seiden could not understand how his best students of the academy could lose some loser. Herod was sure that the matter was proper motivation. Indeed, now Dwarren, Chloe, and Celia looked very sorry for, as they considered themselves the best of the best, and Leo went around them all alone. There was nothing to do, and Professor Seiden went to his students. He held out Chloe's hand, realizing that she, like the rest, was very upset by the loss. He helped the girl get up, saying that regardless of the result of the game, all team members must bow to their opponents, respect for the winners. In addition, the man knew very well that his students laid out to the full, trying to make their class winners. With such words, he reassured his girlish heart. Seiden was sure that his students should always stand with their heads high, for the sake of themselves and those who sincerely worried and was sick during the game. After such a soulful motivational speech, all his students perceived the perception of the spirit. Meanwhile, just on himself boorish manner, Herod ordered all students to build up a string of quietly, and at the end of the game in the bastards properly. The completion ceremony began. The professor thanked all students for participating, saying that first, class students were able to show their talents. They also noted the resistance of the spirit of the parallel class, which helped the students hold out to the very end and not fall into the dirt. Satan hoped that the friendly rivalry of students would not end there, and they would continue to demonstrate their highest level abilities. Now the time has come to shake hands as a sign of respect and gratitude for the good game. Celia shook Chelsea's hand. The girl was surprised that her sworn girlfriend lasted so long. Chelsea did not become silent and returned the noble of Celia, called her a popped squid. Carl and Duran were from one region, so Leo's friend was doubly more pleasant to keep the victory over the prince. But he looked at Carl as if he had torn the liver and fed the dogs. Meanwhile, Chloe lowered her head down, and bitter tears came to her eyes. But Leo held out his hand to her reconciliation, believing that the girl coped with her task amazing. He was sure that there would be very little time, Chloe would be updated, and would become a magnificent sorceress. But the girl misunderstood him, considering that the guy was mocking her. Leo did not understand the reason for such hostility. He stood and smiled, radiating sincerity. Therefore, Chloe still had to shake his hand, while she knew that the day would come when she could defeat him. The game and training are over, so Carl, Leo, and Chelsea went to the cafe deliciously to eat, discussing the issue of entering the school club. The main character was not one club, and Lumen did not like the Lumen Academy, so his plans included creating his own club, which Chelsea would be happy to enter. This will not be the most ordinary club, for example, such as chess. Here students will do research work. Namely, Leo planned to conduct a deep study and find out the whole truth about the hero of the Source of Kaylee, which everyone considered a fake hero. According to Carl, this was a stupid idea, since no one would join such a club. But it was wrong. Chelsea will be happy to visit the club with Leo. Suddenly, the students who were in the cafe jumped from their places and ran to the window, because they saw something very interesting there. Carl was among those who ran to the window, since he remembered that today was the very day when the top senior students had to return to the academy. 3-5-year students, rumpled clothes, were proudly walking around the territory of the academy after they returned from the mission to clean up the dungeons. Leo, like many others, knew that fragments of the heroic protocol were scattered around the world, and there are periods when they pour into our world and then form a dungeon. Lumen's senior students are sent to strip these dungeons. Their missions can last from week to month or even more. Many years ago, Raina Mom Leo also had a similar experience. Now 5-year students have made an indelible impression on Chelsea and Carl. So, a small group was headed by a muscular guy with East Lee Jemiah. A beautiful and unique South of Toria Yang walked next to him. The color of their group added a pale, low young man in a hood named Yulta. Suddenly, Carl thought about, there were 3 people in the group and there was not enough their leader, so the question arose where he went. The main character listened carefully to the story to a friend, so he did not immediately notice and felt someone pulled him by the shoulder from behind. What happened so quickly that when Carl turned to his friend, he did not find him in the same place. It is not surprising that Celia came to the cafe, and even without external conversations, Leo pulled along an unknown direction, puzzling in the cousin to infinity. When they were already in the courtyard of the academy, the girl released Leo's hand, saying that he must definitely go with her in one place. The essence of their small escape was that the head of the student council, Riz, wanted to meet with the head of the freshmen in the city. Although Leo didn't really understand why he had to meet with the president of the student council, he followed the Celia and turned out to be a very cozy city cafe that Riz chose to meet. For a long time, the girl was unhappy with the choice of the meeting place. But as soon as she saw a young man at the entrance, she shone like 1,000 stars. She jumped from her seat and hugged her older brother firmly, whom she had not seen for a long time. The young man stroked the girl on the head as a little kitten, drawing my attention to the cousin, which was already heard about, because the Universal first appeared at the academy. The guys took their places at the table, made an order, and set about treating, which was very tasty here. Suddenly, Reese drew attention to the fact that the sister behaves a little strange. It turned out she was careful, as she first tried this dish. She caused her to live a piece, as all the fears evaporated. The dish was insanely tasty. In truth, the young man had long wanted to bring his sister to this place, but he did not get cases, and he was also glad to see the son of his beloved aunt. As a child, he met with Aunt a couple of times, and at the academy she was pleased with the famous person, about which legends were composed. Leo knew that you were his mother very well, but he still did not expect to remember her at the academy. But it was pure truth, for example. Raina was the first to openly stated that the dessert in the school hostel was disgusting to taste. Then she gathered dissatisfied students and burst into the office of the director of the academy with protests on this occasion. On this, the story did not end. Celia and Reese for a long time discussed the details of that significant event. Leo, of course, was interesting to listen to his mother's exploits. But at the same time, he carefully examined the young man in front of him, noting the slightest details, and understanding why he was called the strongest student at the academy. There was no doubt that in the near future, Reese would become a real hero who would be proud of the house of graders. But now he was an ordinary student and a good older brother who wanted to treat his youngest delicious dessert. The meal was over, and Riz took on the payment of the account, saying that brother and sister could go forward. When Leo was already at the exit from the cafe, Reese noticed a small glow in her inner pocket of school uniforms. A second later, he pulled out an object that glowed brightly that this should not have happened. In a special device, there was a fragment of the heroic protocol which reacted, but why he did it, the young man could not understand. Some time passed, and the educational process began again. Professor Herod, putting his legs on the table, held a lecture. Unfortunately, or to joy, it was a self-training lesson nevertheless. The professor was ready to listen to another stupid issue from his students. So Elaine was wondering why they did not have an old class of class. If you conduct a small study, you can notice that in all classes there is already an old man, and only they were left without a representative. Professor Herod really forgot about such a significant matter, but he did not really want to think about this for a long time, so he said that the head of their class will be Leo. The choice of a classmate of the head of the class bypassing the voting procedure did not arrange a number of students, including Alina. In order to modify the students, the professor laid a huge stack of different documents on the table and ordered the headman of the class to disassemble them. Alina definitely did not want to engage in paperwork, so she bit her tongue and sat down at the desk. At this moment, information was transmitted on the student radio communications that classes in the heroic world will be held today. All first-year students, without exception, had to go to the appropriate audience to pass this lesson. Thus, the self-training lesson was over. The professor gave Leo to introduce a student in the audience to pass the heroic world. A large number of students have already gathered there. The first of all her friends Carl and Leo saw Chloe, who looked very tired. Surprisingly, the girl was even glad to see Carl. She wanted to buy from him all restoring and invigorating potions. Business is a business, so a young man without a twinge of conscience gave Chloe 2 bubbles with potions. So far, Carl did not have more drugs necessary for the girl, but Leo did not understand why she was so overstrained at the beginning of the school year. Instead of answering the question, Chloe drove the contents of 2 saving bottles. Now she was in perfect order and is ready to continue to study, so she left without saying goodbye. Carl looked in surprise after the girl. He knew that she had the highest score in magical theory, but at the same time she was so zealous. But the meat better understood the female heart, so she did not condemn the classmate. The bottom line was that Chloe remained in the first place in a magical theory only because Leo still had not pulled knowledge on modern magic. The second place for her was unreasonable, as the girl was a canonical sorceress. Chelsea continued the explanation. For her, personally, as for a combat magician Deuce, the theory of magicians did not matter. But for Chloe, who was going to work in a magic tower, knowledge gaps were unacceptable. Carl still did not raise all these troubles. He was an ordinary practitioner and was proud of it. In addition, he already successfully earned his living with his skills. Meanwhile, the director Kalian wiped the leaflets of his evergreen plants in the office. This helped him calm down, because Riz told him that the damaged fragment of the heroic protocol began to react. It is strange that the page of such a damaged heroic protocol was able to react. Riz himself would not have believed it if he had not stood nearby and had not seen everything with his own eyes. This despite the fact that there were no other relics nearby. In truth, this happened for the first time, so the director of the academy was interested in whether such a reaction was repeated at least once. Now the response of the president of the student council was negative. Kalian took the box with the page of the heroic protocol in his hands and began to carefully examine him. The man understood that it was impossible to leave everything as it is, so he gave the order to carefully understand everything. But then this is, and now he praised the young man for the well-done work, realizing that he was very tired during the mission. Closing the mysterious box, the director called his assistant to Elena. Kalian asked the girl to attribute the page of the heroic protocol to the rest of the exhibits to the source hall, since joint classes were supposed to begin for all first-year-olds there. Reese and Elena left the director's office. He turned away to the window and thought, "You understand that sometimes it happens that even such small fragments of the heroic protocol begin to react. Most often, such anomalies occurred when the hero mentioned in the heroic protocol was nearby. It is not surprising that Leo came to mind." Meanwhile, all first-year students gathered in the same audience. In the same place behind the stands, there was a lecturer of today's lesson. Professor Ariana Neer looked like a very sweet and timid girl, so the students did not react to all her requests to create silence. They completely did not pay attention to the professor, continuing to talk among themselves and make noise. And then strange affairs began to take place with Ariana. Her aura became very aggressive and demonic evil. It seemed that this was not a professor, but a product of hell, since she began to tell students nasty things, threatening reprisals if they did not close their mouths. The first demonstrative victim could be a student on the first desk, which was noisier than the others. The professor was insulting that, until she was included in such a state, the students did not listen to her at all. But now they were not sitting quieter of water below the grass. When a grave silence came in the audience, Ariana again became a sweet, friendly girl. In the audience were students who, for the first time, I had to see this show. But today, they were scared as for the first time. The only one who was not afraid, and even a little happy, was Leo, because even in his past life he did not meet real spiritualists. Since everyone was now concentrated, Ariana continued classes in the heroic hall. The professor showed students a blade, saying that after a heroic protocol appeared in people's lives, some of them considered this enough to create whole heroic clans. It is known that in order to open the world of the hero, you need to have an object that had a deep connection with this hero. Therefore, the world of the hero is easiest to open to the descendants of one or another hero. The Lumen Academy of Time Immemorial is the place of storage of the heroic protocol. This impresses its mark on the educational institution, since the director and the academy itself are obliged to keep in touch with the families of heroes. There are also political reasons for this. Although, according to the professor, the heroic protocol and the academy had more interesting relations that resembled a chest and the key to this chest. I must admit that the lecture of Professor Ariana, Leo liked very much, since he learned new information. At that moment, Elena entered the audience, who brought fragments of the heroic protocol. The professor has not yet noticed the appearance of the director's assistant, and added that heroic classes help students learn more about the world of heroes and about the heroes themselves in particular. Also in the future, each student will need to choose one hero and clear one page of his heroic protocol. At that moment, the professor Elena came up. Ariana held out her hand in the box, knowing that there were fragments of the Russian protocol inside, which were obtained by 5-year students in a recent mission. Now it's time to open the coveted box and show everyone what is in it. Students were waiting for this moment, holding their breath. Today they will experience it, but not everything was so simple, so the professor closed the box. To begin with, Ariana wanted to hear what heroes students want to become. Celia rose the first hand. She wanted to become such a hero that her family had not yet seen, the most powerful and the most fair. Chloe dreamed of becoming a hero who could write a book that will contain her own spell. Carl had a goal to become a hero who can support his comrades during their every battle. But he stood out from the crowd as always. Leo, he said that he would become the hero who once and for all will save the world from a Robos. The take-on of the bold statement of the protagonist plunged into a shock state not only of his classmates, but also the class teachers of the 1st and 5th grades. Leo, with a sense of fulfillment of the duty, took his place behind his desk, and Carl looked at his friend as intelligent. At that moment, even Professor Harida penetrated, as he knew that his student did not throw the wind. The professor thought about the fact that exactly 100 years passed since the moment the hero of our time managed to split the Robos into several parts and seal. But even in this case, from time to time, the moments of the resurrection of evil could be observed. Even one small fragment gave rise to a disaster, so it was strange to hear from a student that he wanted to destroy a Robos forever. The classes approached the most interesting. Ariana said that now they will read a fragment of a mining protocol, after which each student will have to assume who he is about. After that, they will move on to the training of the hero in the world. So that the students do not do anything behind the progress of the lesson will observe Professor Harrod and Seaton. The students languished with anticipation, since for them, immersion in the world of the hero and the passage there was the first time. Tid and Nellie were very nervous, since for the first time they had the opportunity to touch the fragment of the heroic protocol. But the first to the scene were the elders of each class of freshmen. And Professor Ariana held 2 treasured boxes in her hands, since 2 fragments of the heroic protocol were selected for today's lesson. One fragment was quite large, but the second was inferior to his competitor in size at times. The first to touch the fragment of the heroic protocol was the honor of Leo. Everyone thought that he would pick up a large fragment, but Leo's hand reached for the smaller. Surprisingly, the damaged fragment of the heroic protocol began to react again, opening the heroic protocol itself. Obviously, this was not included in the plans of the professors at the academy, but the magic symbols that appeared said that they are now transferred to the world of the hero. It was not possible to stop this process, so being in the hero of the hero, Seaton and Herod looked a little confused. Chen and Abad also did not know how to behave in this situation. Only Leo remained calm. The picture around did not look like life-affirming. The corpses of the dead monsters were lying around. The elders of the freshmen were not ready to see something similar. Suddenly, Professor Seaton saw in front of the walls of a fortress and pointed a finger at them. Leo immediately recognized the walls of Guardslan, the last line of defense in the era of disasters. The young man looked in front of him and could not take his eyes. And then the meaning of what was happening slowly began to reach him, because if he was not mistaken, then this was the same time. Suddenly he heard a familiar voice to Pain. At that moment, a beautiful young girl appeared behind them, who turned to the fictitious hero Kyle, saying that her request was truly stupid. Nevertheless, she continued to stubbornly believe that they had enough strength together to save this sinful world. Looking at a friend, Leo seemed to be transferred 5,000 years ago, and Luzinus continued to smile affectionately, illuminating the bloody darkness of the battlefield with her light. On this touching note, immersion in the world of the hero ended, and the elders of the first year returned to the audience with the teachers. Chen was still impressed by what she saw, so she asked Professor Ariana about what had just happened now. The woman did not know what to answer, so Professor Herod took his hands, who said that all classes were canceled for today, so the students had to leave the audience immediately. No one wanted to leave the audience as the most interesting began, so they went out, whipping among themselves. Leo lingered on the stage. He was in no hurry to put a fragment of the heroic protocol back into the box, because he understood that this was his own fragment. He did not expect that fragments of the heroic protocol Kyle would be so badly damaged and so small. The strange behavior of the young man did not hide from the eyes of Professor Herod, since he was observing the inseparably. Nevertheless, the man did not comment on the situation and released the protagonist into the classroom, where the guy began to tell his classmates about what he saw in the world of the hero. Chelsea and Alina suggested that their classmate visited the world of Hero Luzinus. Therefore, the girls were very upset that they were not lucky enough to plunge into that world, since they were not the elders of the class. Carl, on the other hand, divided a little oil into the fire, saying that Aelin to grow and grow to the headman, for which he received a fist from the girl on the head. At that moment, he went into the premises to Professor Herod. He wanted to punish the noisy students. It is a shame, of course, that they were in his class. Nevertheless, the desire to shed a little blood from him did not disappear, so he gave students two options to choose from. The first is self-training. The second is an exception. Coffin silence hung in the class, and the professor left English without saying goodbye, but clapping the door loudly. Leo did not pay any attention to this show. He did not understand why his heroic protocol was so strange. Neither the head nor the name of the world was displayed in him. It was the impression that someone deliberately ruined his heroic protocol. In fact, each heroic protocol was an object that contained a particle of the power of the departed hero. And if the heroic protocol was damaged, then someone deliberately ruined it, because he did not want this hero to have followers. The conclusion suggested on its own, most in the world he was hated by a Robos. Therefore, the main character needed to find out as soon as possible why his heroic protocol was split. The month has gone unnoticed from the moment the students entered the Lumen Academy. Professor Glenn lectured a magic unit. He announced the topic of a translated exam. It was supposed to be original or unique magic. The problem is that in the era, the formula of activation of magicians ceased to strive for originality, although this kind of magic reflects the deep essence of a particular wizard. But when it comes to a serious battle, there is nothing better to have an ace in the sleeve in the form of original magic. A bright, albeit with a small fragment, the use of original magic was an example of the star magic of elves, which only the great hero of the moon could use. At these words, Professor Chloe stared at her desk neighbor, Leo Flew. In her memory, there were still two fresh memories of the recent game of Bastards, where Leo just used elven magic. The guy did not pay attention to her strange behavior, but his gaze suddenly fell on the book next to the girl. Black, frightening, evil energy came from the subject. It is okay that Chloe does not notice this, so she incorrectly interpreted the look of her desktop and hastened to hide the book, thinking that he wanted to pick her up from her. The main character understood that this was a magical book, but he couldn't draw any more conclusions yet. Professor Glenn announced that their lesson was completed. All students hastened to leave the audience until the professor changed his mind. Chloe tried to get lost in the crowd, but at the last minute, Leo ran up to her and grabbed her hand, so he wanted to talk to her. He even smiled politely and offered to dine together in the cafeteria. At the same time, the young man glanced at the briefcase of the girl, in which lay the mysterious book that she hid from him. The only problem was that Chloe was very belligerent and hostile to the main character, as it was obsessed with the thought of defeating him in the upcoming exam, so she did not want to spend time after friendly gatherings. At that moment, Carl ran up the guy and the girl, acquired Leo, saying that he did not understand why the guy was the place of the Snow Queen. Leo did not manage to answer anything. Then Chloe spoke. She had already lost to the main character, but in all regarding the formulas, she must be better than him. Therefore, this time she was determined to defeat the young man at all costs. Her eyes said that the girl was ready to pay any goal and to do anything to win. Chloe's determination made it clear to Leo that he had no right to take this exam after sleeves, so as not to offend the girl. Snow Queen Academy Lumen nodded in the affirmative. The protagonist accepted its game conditions, offering to offer all efforts to prepare for the exam. Future heroes stuck their promise with a strong handshake. The evening came. All classes at the academy were completed, and Leo came to the heroes of the heroes. He knew that it was here that the secret archives of the Academy Lumen should be. The main character hoped that it was in these archives that he could find a record of his heroic protocol and what happened to him. The young man rose and rose endless steps up the stairs of the tower until someone called him. Raising his eyes up, Leo saw in front of him a sultry southern beauty and fifth-year student Toria Yang. The girl was glad to meet a young man, since she heard too much interesting about him from Professor Glenn. Having greeted, the guy wanted to continue his procession up, but Thoria blocked his path. She did not understand that the first year-old forgot in the Tower of the Heroes. But the wrong thing was attacked. Leo quickly found the answer. They say he wants to talk with the president of the student council. The girl appreciated his resourcefulness, not immediately but let go forward, hoping that by the end of the semester, the guy would completely switch to the magical unit. On this note, they parted, and ahead of Leo saw a saving elevator. But no matter how much he presses the buttons, nothing happened. It was a shame that others could use the elevator, while the main character could not understand the principle of his work. But the young man was very lucky since Lee Jemiah was nearby, who showed how the elevator works. The big man looked affectionately, and Leo smiled sweetly, saying that he had heard a lot about him interesting. Leo showed respect for the elder who wanted to know that the guy brought the heroes to the tower. The main character repeated the memorized phrase that he wanted to talk with the president of the student council. The fearlessness of a young man who was not afraid of a broad-shouldered 5-year student amazed the imagination and admired Lee. Leo tried to appease the high school student, but he was not angry, but concluded that the nightly branch created specifically for people as the youngest. How already Leo was tired that everyone was trying to lure him to his branch, but it was necessary not to be rude and smile. Lee released him a little more, and the protagonist got to the Studs Council's office and knocked on the door, asking for permission to enter. Reese did not hold Kuzen's door and let him in. However, he did not understand why the guy came right here. Leo did not wind circles around and immediately turned to the essence of his visit. He needed access to the secret archives of the academy. To put it mildly, it was a very unexpected request. Besides, Reese understood that Kuzen was not joking. It was not in his character. Only now it was not so simple to get there, but there were 2 ways. The first was to clean the heroic dungeon to return the page of the heroic protocol to the source. Everything was clear with this, so Leo wanted to know everything about the second method. To find out the details of the second method, the protagonist was to become part of the student council. On this, they ended the conversation. Several days passed, and the selection began in the nightly unit. Carl decided to use this moment and earn a little money, selling all popcorn and drinks. His entrepreneurial vein was really amazing. Alina believed that even without an academy, a guy could become a big person. Leo did not pay attention to his friend, and in the crowd of students, he tried to find Chloe, but she was nowhere to be seen. Meanwhile, Professor Ain came out to the students, who examined them with a picky look. So games with swords ended, and the time has come for the first serious match for a place in the nightly department. Hall Snape first entered the battle of the elite class, but the class of losers was honored to represent Leo Flo. The guys took a step forward, and meanwhile, Carl saw Professor Seaton and ran to him. The young man hoped that he would be able to sell popcorn and drinks to a man. The professor decided to play in a short-term way and sent the guy to Herod, who could be pursued over his student and make a purchase. It was a strategic defeat, so Carl was in sorrow, and Celia decided to help a friend. She, with the sweetest view of which was only capable of, began to persuade Seaton to buy them popcorn and drinks. The rest of the students pulled themselves up on an unspoken call and began to chant the name of the respected professor. Under such pressure, the rock would have broken, but the professor was holding out with the last strength. But he is not a rock and a man, so he surrendered and told Carl to give all his students 1 popcorn and drinks. It was a little victory of the delight. Meanwhile, Leo and Hall went out onto the field, preparing for battle. The protagonist was even glad that he was the first, because he could go to rest faster. It sounded a little offensive, but Hall was not particularly offended, since he was in the hand that he was underestimated. The battle was supposed to be interesting. Besides, in order to become a member of the nightly unit, it was necessary to win 5 victories in 5 fights. Nobody made bets yet, since the students did not know what level of nightly the headman had. Yes, he was a universal, but that could play him both plus and minus. In addition, Hall was not a simple boy from the street. He was considered the 3rd most powerful in the elite class. Therefore, the guy dreamed of teaching a lesson to a loser old man who constantly mistaken next to his Celia. So Professor Ain announced that the one who would be the first to defend the enemy will win, so he asked him to take this battle as the present. Suddenly, from the main building of the academy, Leo felt the unpleasant pressure of the dark aura. This pulling, sticky, nasty energy was well known to him from the distant past. Meanwhile, Chloe sat in the room, overlaying books, studying the next magic formulas. Once again, she was unhappy with the result, so she tore a sheet of paper with inscriptions. She literally shook from anger at herself, to a low level of skills, to the fact that she could not create a standing, unique magic. Despair and anger. They mixed up and filled her heart to the brim, and then burst outward, and the girl threw the books to the floor. She remembered the confident Leo flew again and again. Soon a practical exam, she could not and did not want to lose to her sworn opponent, but not this time. Her gaze hooked on the ancient folio, which fell to the floor. The book was from the forbidden. Not everyone would dare to use it, but she attracted the girl with her strength, her knowledge, her dark aura. The decision of Chloe was made immediately. She was not going to retreat and was ready to make a deal even with the devil to defeat Leo. Meanwhile, the protagonist, standing at the training ground, felt something was wrong, like the sticky traces of evil at the academy. But so far, there was no time and no place to think about it, since Hall took advantage of the moment and attacked the protagonist. It is good that Leo had a phenomenal reaction and a sense of battle, so he was able to dodge the enemy's spear. Opponents increased the distance for the maneuver, and Leo realized that he had not such a simple opponent because he very cleverly controlled with a snake spear. The new attack, but the main character does not leave the line of fire, but stands still, stopping the spear with his right hand and a centimeter from his face. It was only the beginning, and then the guy abruptly pulled the spear over himself with all his might, and Hall almost flew into his arms. But as a result, he received not affectionate hugs, but ran into a blow with his fist in the jaw. With this blow, the main character sent his enemy to the other end of the field to lie on the grass. Leo remained standing where he stood, rubbing his bruised hand. He smiled and was pleased with himself, waiting for further actions of the enemy. And he was not mistaken, since the most interesting was just beginning. Now Hall launched a poisonous fog. The guy was sure that Leo did not know how to use the aura, which means that the strength will not help him against this technique. Only now Hall did not know that his information was outdated, and Leo, meanwhile, called for fire. The fire carefully wrapped the guy's body, like a blanket, saving from a poisonous fog. For Hall, it looked funny, because he was sure that only the flame of Celia could at least somehow cope with his poison. And here the mistake came out. The poison began to disappear in Leo Flame. Hall really did not understand what was happening, how the headman could squeeze him, and where his poisonous fog went. Watching the cousin, Celia also did not understand when he managed to increase such a power of his fiery aura. Step by step, Leo approached his enemy, and his flame was not inferior in the strength of the cousin flame. It is amazing that the main character did not tell everyone about his exploits, but proved by real actions what he stands. Nevertheless, Hall left another trump card, though he did not plan to use it so early. But the guy wanted to win now, and not in the future, so he suffered a minute and attacked Leo. The secret technique used by him was called snakes. A minute later, a huge green snake squeezed the main character's body into a vice, accelerating his flame. It turns out that the guy came up with this technique to confront the Celia, so he was curious of the girl's reaction. This technique was focused on the capture of the flame of the dweller, but the girl silently looked at the fight, not expressing any emotions. But in vain, Hall stared at her and did not follow his opponent. And there was something to see, because the snake's body began to take huge blisters. And then he was completely torn to pieces because of the heat of the flame of the Greater's flow. What was happening seemed impossible, but nevertheless it was a cruel reality, not a dream. Anger spurred Hall to attack Leo again. And since the guy no longer used the aura for his tricks, then Leo decided to expose his sword and repulse once and for all. The main character was enough for one accurate and sharp wave of the blade to stop the enemy's attack. Hall could not stop and rebuild, so under the onslaught, Leo dropped his spear. Then Leo put his sword to the enemy's throat and said that the next time the guy should not lose his vigilance while the flame of the protagonist burns. At the same moment, the professor announced the unconditional victory of Leo. The stands exploded with applause. Chelsea strongly rejoiced at the success of a friend. Under the noise of the crowd, the protagonist left the training ground. Hall also went to his class. Now he understood that Leo was not strong in theory. He is a magnificent practitioner who was not inferior to anyone at the academy. Suddenly, at the edge of the site, he was met by Celia. The girl saw that the classmate was still under a strong impression and shared his feelings, after which she praised for a good job. The guy blushed. Probably, he was not even ashamed to lose Leo now, because he praised him and considered him cool. Meanwhile, the exam continued, and the Q competed Aline. The girl was positive and combined. But her ardor quickly subsided when Chen Xia, a top-end student of the academy, walked towards her. If you want, you don't want to, but it was necessary to pick yourself up, so the girls became opposite each other, preparing for battle. The battle began. Chen used an element of water for her attacks. Elin was its complete opposite, using an element of fire. While Chen gracefully created a ball around her water, Elin was impudent and quickly rushed right on her in attack. Watching the scene that she unfolded below, Leo understood that one of them would be very painful in a second, and he guessed to whom exactly. Unfortunately, the guy's forecast was correct. The face of Elena distorted the grimace of pain, and her sword did not reach the goal. Moreover, the girl was thrown back at a decent distance from the rival, which stood and did not make any unnecessary movements. But Elaine lay in a deplorable state on the ground and breathed heavily. Thus, not particularly straining the winner in this duel, Chen Shi became. Several minutes passed, and Elena came to her senses, although she was painful, but she was proud of herself, because she did not bash in front of a stronger enemy, but overcame herself, and even tried to fight. Yes, it was a little victory, but Leo was sure that even in this situation, if the girl concentrated, she would have performed better. Meanwhile, Professor Ain continued the exam and called the participants in the next duel. The first was Celia, and the company was supposed to be a classmate Duran Moira on a duel. Everyone was looking forward to the start of the fight, lurking his breath, and Carl echoed popcorn as not himself, anticipating an incredible sight. He was ready to jump out onto the field and hurry the opponents. It's not to say that his requests and threats acted on classmates, but they activated their auras and exposed blades. It was time for them to find out which of them is the best knight in the class. They rushed to the attack too. Small stinging lightning and hot tongues of flame reached the stands, where curious students sat. It was completely incomprehensible which of these two mastodons could win in battle. Leo suggested that most likely Celia could win, but this is not for sure. In some ways, she was undoubtedly inferior to Duran, but if you look in her eyes now, they could see confidence and unlimited determination to win. Also, most likely the plan has already ripened in her head how to turn the situation in your favor. Nevertheless, while Duran hit everyone with his phenomenal speed, and Celia is not so blocking, she could hardly dodge the enemy's blow. The frequency of attacks by a young man increased every minute. The girl went into a dumb defense and could not really counterattack. And she was tired of this order, so she concentrated the entire power of her flame in the sword. She sent him up, creating the figure of the dome shape above herself and Duran. This was an unexpected turn for the young man, so he slowed down, stopped, and began to assess the situation. Students in the stands rustled, realizing that the jokes were over. The main character was also proud of his cousin because a girl can when she wants to think non-standard, and this is proof of that. Carl demanded explanations. Leo explained that the training ground is very large and the Dwarren was very fast, so Celia realized that she could not catch it, so she found a way to turn the landing ground into her advantage. So, she created a barrier from the fire. He not only protected classmates from the investigation of their battle, but also limited Duran's movement, and the fire prevented him from watching, and at every sigh he burned the lungs. And before that the cousin kept well, but now she turned the situation in her favor. Below, the events developed rapidly. While Dwarren was trying to adapt to the heat, Celia had already attacked him from behind. But the guy had a well-developed flair, so he turned sharply and began a rapid counterattack. But Celia intercepted his sword and did not let go. Incredibly, but it was a trap, and the guy got into it like a mouse in a mousetrap. At that very moment, Celia hit Dueling in her forehead with all his strength. Obviously, her skull box was stronger than that of the guy. It seemed that he was about to lose consciousness after a blow. Duran fell and did not move. Professor JN declared this battle the winner of this battle. The stands exploded with applause, and the girl advised the classmate to work on physical strength. It was unpleasant to hear this to Duran. Nevertheless, he adequately accepted his defeat, like the counsel of Celia. Leo believed that in the victory of the cousin there was a share and his merits, since their training was not in vain. The exam still lasted for some time, but he also came to an end. All participants received 4 victories and 1 defeat, all but Leo, who had all 5 victories. A week later, Professor Harrod conducted a written linguistic exam. He hoped that everyone had tried well and laid out to the full. Having gathered the work, the man went to check them, warning everyone that he was waiting for good results because he did not want to send his wobberies home. When the door behind the professor slammed shut, Elaine gave free rein to emotions. She no longer withstand the pressure and scarecrow by expulsion. Meanwhile, the male half of the class believed that Chelsea coped best to the test, so they asked her to say the right answers. While everyone was running in galley, Leo tried to take a little nap after the exam. In addition, he was sure that everything went very well, and Nellie was surprised when he saw his face, because he always kept everything under control. But it turned out that he was also a man. Therefore, she offered to heal with her magic if something hurts him. But this service applied only to Leo, so Carl with pain in the back and neck was in the flight. And instead of the soft magic of healing, he received a session of friendly patting on the back from Chelsea, after which the alternating magician was definitely needed. But with Leo, she was Milo herself. She was even worried that a friend did not attend practical classes on a call. But she had no reasons for excitement, since the main character trained, only did it where no one saw him. The girl calmed down, and then asked what rank, according to Leo's forecasts, they would be assigned to him in class on call after passing the exam. A stupid question. Leo was sure that he would get the highest result. So the day of the call exam came. All students gathered in the stands of the stands to see the show, because the racing of summons is an incredible event. Rumbates, a third-year student of the draft department, will comment on the grandiose race. Celia, everything that was happening seemed an ordinary farce, not an exam, but Riz had another opinion. This is a tradition that is the heart of the Lumen Academy, so everyone was looking forward to this event. Carl, on the other hand, regarded the race of summons as a great opportunity to earn and sell popcorn and drinks. In truth, many participants in the race, such a noise strained and confused, for example, Tidida. Only Leo kept a little away from the rest of the freshmen and radiated confidence. But no one was going to leave him alone, so Elsa approached him. The girl heard about his stunning success in the exam in knightly art, but she was tormented by doubts that he had time to prepare for an appeal exam. Only now Leo upset her, because he was preparing and diligently for this test, even though the girl has never seen him in training and did not believe him. In general, the main character for the whole department was in the eye, so the guys were aggressively configured and drove him off once again from their units to any other. Only Tid was on the side of Leo and tried to calm her classmates. True, the young man did not have enough authority for this, so the rest did not listen to him and asked not to cover the older. Chen observing the skirmish, I realized that the summons race would be very tense if before it the situation around it was so much heated. The skirmish did not stop. San Li did not understand what Chen and Leo forgot here, since they performed so well at the knight's unit. The girl was very embarrassed and did not know what to respond to rudeness, but Walden came to her aid, stepping forward, saying that it became too noisy. He looked more impressive and dangerous, so many immediately reduced their ardor. If someone wanted to measure the duration of contracts with a summoned or something else, then it was better to do it away from him while he is good. Sen Liu almost spit with anger from indignation and anger. Walden once again repeated that he was annoyed by people who consider a longer contract from summons, but education did not allow him to poke a finger in such a person, but burning his eyes was a completely different matter. Only not all people had a sufficient mind to understand a delicate hint. Sen was one of those. He considered himself better than Walden, since the guy also did not come to practical classes. And then everyone saw how good Walden became angry. He said that he did not need to work out the foundations, because he was not a loser who could not even manage the griffin. Sen Liu did not possess the endurance and dignity, so he tried to hit the opponent. But the main character stopped his attempt in the route and warned that if the guy starts a fight on the exam, he would not get off with a simple removal. It would end with his expulsion and recognition as professionally unsuitable. San pulled his hand away, but he no longer sought to continue the fight. Meanwhile, Tids approached Leo, informing the headman that their weather from the call class was very hostile. The problem was that Grandfature flourished in the draft department. For a rather long time, the second time had taken out their anger at the first. Doors, since Chen and Leo got into the top of the academy, while being members of not only their units. Now Leo understood why all the evil destructive views threw everyone into him. They considered his behavior neglect of the draft unit. Meanwhile, a man appeared in the stands in the hood, who looked for himself a victim. Everything was ready for the performance. The figures stood in their places, so he opened the spatial portal and ducked into it. Sen Liu chose his pawn, who was already glowing with anger, so he was not sorry. The race was about to begin, so Rumba decided to explain the rules briefly. During this exam, first-year students could only use their call skills. It was forbidden to use aura and magic. At the first stage of the exam, students had to tame the griffins in the cage. After that, saddle creatures, and with their help to cross the island of summons. Next, make one circle above the silent lake, after which they will return to the academy. First, year students took their places, preparing for the start of the exam. Everyone wanted to find out which of them is better. Professor Yura warned that all students should do everything as in training, and those who could not withstand pressure may not return. The exam began, only now a number of freshmen decided to play dirty. Instead of the start of the race, they attacked Leo and Walden to neutralize them as rivals. Leo was not afraid of such a sudden attack, and defended himself with the help of his flame. Meanwhile, Tid already saddled the griffin and called for his main character. But the main character understood that this was an exam, so he asked a classmate to worry for himself, but here he himself can handle it. Although Tadid felt guilty, he still decided to follow the advice of the headman and start the race. Until that moment, Leo already understood that he did not expect him to interfere with his head to fall off the indignation of the callers, but so that someone began to interfere openly. Walden had things better than Leo. He cleverly canceled the call of his rivals. Then he went to the cage with the griffin about to free him. Turning the creature, he turned to the main character, seeing that he still had problems. Leo was grateful to him for his participation, but he believed that he himself had to cope with everything. If so, then Walden took off into the sky, leaving Leo on the ground. Meanwhile, Chelsea in the stands went crazy with worries about the protagonist. Not less but the fear of Professor Yura, who watched the examination of the exam. She knew that there were certain disagreements between her students, but did not think that they were so big. The woman was afraid that the main character would not be able to resist a classmate, since he studied only a call and not the magic of spirits. Suddenly, she rounded her eyes in surprise because Leo found a way out of this situation. The young man began to read the spell in the ancient language of spirits, asking them, clear his path and give the blessing of nature. After a moment, the spirits of fire and air appeared next to him. Leo continued everything and continued to read the spell. This was another opening of the exam at the academy, because no one assumed that a freshman could know and own the tongue of spirits thoroughly. It seemed impossible, but it actually happened. I regret the conspirators smiled at the professor. Cars, Yura was in anticipation of the future race, which was supposed to begin for her right now. Yes, and now she could exhale with relief. This guy never disappointed her. Meanwhile, a group of freshmen has already flew off at a decent distance from the academy. The guys who built the attack on Walden and Leo gloated. Now they thought that the first place in this exam would be behind them, and the top students are only letters and words and nothing more. Elsa flew ahead. The girl was unhappy with such guests of the guys. She believed that she sat enough and skills to defeat Leo and Walden in a garlic duel. In addition, she was worried that people would think about their unit after such exits. It is obvious that the opinion of the callers would fall below the center of the earth. Such nonsense was not particularly worried about Sanya. It was the main thing for him to annoy Leo and Walden, but to win the competition himself. Elsa became disgusting to be next to this young man, so she added speed and escaped forward, asking him to think with her head before doing something. Her comments and acts angered the guy. In his eyes, she turned into a bug, which was insolent because of her pride. It was quite difficult to catch up with her, so Sen decided to come the second one, which was also a good result. Before the exams, he attended each training session, so he considered himself the second after Elsa in the control of flying summons. But the music did not play for long, and Chen already caught up with him on his griffin. The girl was not for nothing one of the top students, so not only the speed of her movement was amazing, but also the stand that differed from the standard for riders. Envy, this is what the young man was experiencing now, because the girl did not even use the magic of the spirit in order to speed up her summon, so he invited the rest of the classmates to eliminate it from the distance. Many obeyed Sanya. As they were not sure of their own abilities, it was easier for them to harm a classmate. The self-improvement. It is not surprising that one of the girls called on their spirit for this. Therefore, the little prankster hurried to the girl who escaped forward. A strong gust of wind almost dumped Chen from the griffin, but she resisted in the saddle, which did not delight a classmate who attacked her. Yes, maybe the girl was not going to start her hands so now she was repulsing the attacker. Chen without hesitation hit a classmate with a foot in a solar plexus. The girl lost her balance and fell from the griffin down, screaming that it was unfair to her person. But Chen was pleased with herself, because she did not violate a single rule, using only gross power instead of aura. -1 rival, and Chen breaks forward again, catching up with the leaders of the race. In less than 5 minutes, she caught up with Mr. Liu. The guy was angry again. He threatened the girl, saying in vain she became in his way. Chen admitted that she had no experience in the air, but she will not be opposed to the main instigator of the riots today. Her words sounded quite mysteriously, so San Liu did not immediately understand what she had in mind. The problem was that the tricks of the young man were angry not only to the girl, but also by many others. At that moment, a huge fireball similar to an explosion appeared behind them. Seeing this miracle, San Liu was very scared. These were not just fiery flashes, it was Walden's revenge to all the offenders who prevented him from achieving the goal. Since he was played so dirty against him, the young man no longer restrained his strength and cleared his way to pass the exam, using the magic of fiery spirits. Now the vile classmates were not up to jokes, and they no longer looked so confident and decisive, rushing into Walden's scatter from the anger. True, such a solution did not really help them. Many of them were fried already, and someone fell from the griffin. Sen Liu barely coped with the griffin management. Meanwhile, Leo was still at the starting point for passing the exam, since today luck was not on his side, and he could not tell the griffin to cooperate. The atmosphere between the guy and the creature in the arena was very oppressive. In the beginning, the young man did not understand why this was happening. But then he noticed that the wing of the griffin was injured. Leo understood that the griffin himself could not get such an injury, which meant that his classmates who had future heroes resorted to trauma to the creature. Nevertheless, the young man tried to shorten the creature, although he realized that he was very painful. In the stands of Celia and Reese, they were very worried about his cousin, who was going on a very unjustified risk, but perhaps he had some brilliant plan in his pocket. He had a plan, but for his implementation, it was necessary to sit on a griffin, and it was extremely difficult to do. The main character understood the feelings of the griffin, but at the same time he wanted him to begin to obey him. At some point, Leo was tired of all this fuss. He viciously glanced at the griffin, ordering him to obey. Only now it came to the creature that it was better for him to be a good boy. The griffin did not resist anymore. Now it was the case to sit down on him and fly. What the young man did perfectly. Only now the commentator and the rest of the students noticed that Griffin Leo was wounded by a wing. The main character understood that his griffin would hurt, but he was sure that he would completely cope. Now the time has come to fulfill the second part of the plan. For this, Leo decided to call for the contract of the Phoenix Cub. As soon as the baby appeared, he enveloped his flame Leo and Griffin. I observed what was happening. Celia did not understand what a cousin used her flame. Reese was later confused because his cousin did not use their family flame. It was not related to the aura at all. Meanwhile, the race continued. I am a lot of students behind you since their griffins were very wounded. But their hope, at least not the last, faded away, since in addition to them, Leo was carried on his griffin with a fiery arrow. Everything went according to plan, and the young man asked his griffin to accelerate a little. Suddenly something happened that no one could expect. Sen Liu blocked the roads ahead of the students on a terrible monster. Now Leo has felt uneasy. A few minutes before he described events, Elsa flew up to Walden and asked the guy to stop rushing with fireballs. The young man immediately drew attention to her and reluctantly decided to give way and stop his little revenge. Nevertheless, at the exam, he was not going to give the first place to the girl, so he launched his little mischievous fiery spirit into her. Only here was what seemed innocent mischief from a powerful fiery attack with the action of the spirit of the air, so Elsa had to run away. It was the highest aerobatics, so the girl was a little shocked, since she had no idea that her classmate was, and in magic, unknowledgeable. Well, even so, she was not going to stand silently on the sidelines and give her victory to someone else. Elsa deftly maneuvered between the fireballs and said that it does not matter how powerful the young man's attack would be if you can dodge it. Once the fire and wind did not work, then Walden decided to use another approach and see if the girl could dodge his attack this time. Now he has combined the elements of ice and lightning among themselves. And after a moment, arrows of ice flew into the girl. But this did not produce an intimidating effect on it, since Elsa ordered her griffin to spit in these arrows with fire. Arrows from ice broke under the pressure of fire. Walden did not expect such agility from the girl, as the fact that she would use the technique of strengthening the spirit by 3 summons. While Elsa and Walden found out a relationship between themselves, Chen Shi swept past them a whirlwind. But no one was going to give her victory for her beautiful eyes, so Elsa used one of her secret techniques and stopped the girl, throwing a spiritual noose around her neck and pulled over herself. And the young man again arranged a fire show, thus separating Chen Shi from her griffin. The girl understood that if it continues to continue, she could seriously suffer, so she still managed to break a stray on her neck. Then she deftly jumped onto her griffin. Now she clearly understood that Walden and Elsa were just considered to me the tops of the class. Suddenly the girl froze in place and looked forward. There was something strange. I am surprising that the griffins ahead began to behave strangely, since a black winger appeared in front of them. And on her riding San Liu sat on her, who was glowing with the desire to kill everyone in his path. Chen Xia tried to convey to him the idea that it was not strictly prohibited to use a griffin during the summons race and was considered a violation of the rules. Only now the young man missed her comments past his ears, as he was absolutely directed. The main thing is to win the competition. He despised all his classmates. Consider yourself the best spell and calloused of spirits, so he ignored their words and asked to get out of his path. Many were surprised that Sen Liu could conclude a contract with a black Wyverna, though they believed that something was wrong with this Weaver. Meanwhile, Leo caught up with his classmates. San Li noticed the guy. He did not understand how he managed to get to this place. Nevertheless, he was going to kill him. On the protagonist, the chatter of a classmate did not make any impression. I wanted to know where he took this lizard. Sen Liu misunderstood interest in this issue, so he began to boast that he could tame this creature with the help of his skills and enormous power. And here was the root of the problem. The guy believed that he tamed Sumaman, but in fact he flew on Fafnir. It was an ancient monster, which was used by Tartaros magicians in the past. In the era of despair, Leo and his friends destroyed one such lizard, and today he sees that some average invader of the Academy Lumen flies on Fafnir. Meanwhile, Sen Liu set his allegedly Wyvern on classmates, so she attacked them with fire. Leo was lucky. He was able to make some efforts and dodge the fiery beam. Walden also had good things. The ray did not hurt him. But Elsa's griffin rolled over in the air, but the girl restrained herself in the saddle. Only Chen Xia had real problems, since the fire beam was aimed right at her, and the girl could not dodge in any way. It was too late to try to maneuver somehow, so she took advantage of her magic of water in order to block the fire. After a moment, 2 forces opposite in nature collided. The girl's protection burst at the seams. She realized that she couldn't hold out for a long time, because Fafnir fire was too hot and powerful. It was a defeat. The shield of Chen Xia cracked her griffin and she fell down. The main character could not allow his friend to suffer, so he decided to join the battle. Nevertheless, he was able to catch Chen almost into the ground itself. The girl lost consciousness, so the first thing he had to help her, and then deal with everything else. He informed Walden and Elsa that he would let his girlfriend go to the ground. While Leo with all his might helped her friend, with San Liu, strong metamorphoses began to take place. He began to resemble some demon, and not on a person. His thirst for blood became too strong, so the young man could not cope with his emotions and directed down to attack the classmates of Fafnir. Meanwhile, there was a real commotion at the academy, but the commentator did not stop and continued to say obvious things, for which he received a strong impetus from Professor Yura. The woman grabbed the microphone and informed everyone that the race was suspended, after which she asked all professors to call for their flying summons. In the meantime, Glenn went to the commentator's cabin, and Yura made them delighted that her student did not conclude a contract with a regular summoner, but with a demonic beast. The professors did not know how to react to this unexpected news. After all, the problem was not even that the student concluded a contract with a demonic beast, but with the fact that soon this same beast would drive him crazy. Herod also joined them and put forward the theory that someone from the side influenced the student and helped him conclude a contract with a demonic beast. It was impossible to pull the time, so Yura was supposed to capture Sen Liu with the rest of the professors. The task of other professors was to divide and defend students at the academy. Satan and Herida had a special mission. Meanwhile, in the forest, Leo managed to safely lower his girlfriend to the ground. He drew attention to the fact that Walden and Elsa were in a hurry to his aid. But the problem was that Sen Li pursued them. The guy sank down next to them, saying that if they wanted to hide, they had to do better, but he did not expect Leo to hide anywhere. The protagonist even tried to reason the classmate, saying that he was not managing a summon. Leo's statement greatly hurt San Liu, who continued to believe that he was sitting on a black wyvern. He did not believe that he had concluded a contract with a demonic beast, but there was no reason for excitement since Leo was going to destroy this monster. As 5,000 years ago, so now the guy was not going to give a monster a chance of salvation. Once he was able to win, then he can. Only now San Liu did not understand that everything was serious and flooded with wild laughter, thinking that jokes were joking with him. Leo and the rest of the guys were still waiting for a convenient moment to attack. The situation worsened as Sen Liu began to rapidly lose his mind under the influence of the power of the demonic beast. Therefore, the monster again attacked future heroes, trying to turn them into coals. But suddenly a huge stone hand appeared from under the ground, which became a shield against fire. Soon, the whole body of a huge stone golem appeared from under the ground. The flame was rapidly approaching the guys, and only the golem did not allow them to turn into barbecue. It turned out that Golem was called by Walden, who agreed with the headman 100% that they needed to destroy the vile monster. Sen Liu was furious. The technique of creating a golem prevented his brilliant plan for gaining victory in the test. Meanwhile, Elsa approached Leo. The girl did not like that the guy wanted to do everything alone, but to leave them aside, so she was about to support him too. She understood that first of all they needed to share the monster and San Liu. This was the right decision, only they needed to prepare for the fact that the golem was ready to crumble from minute to minute. The determination of classmates caused the protagonist to smile and returned in distant times when he fought side by side with other talented heroes. Meanwhile, Golem really restrained the flame, and already all went cracks. And then he completely broke, and San Liu on Fafnir flew close to the clearing, where the guys were. And then she came to the four, who tried either to hover the monster or drop the rider. Neither the first nor the second one really managed to, but Sen Liu succeeded in angry with a crazy one. Therefore, he clicked his fingers and gave the order to the monster to attack the opponents. But this time the guys expected something like that, so Walden intercepted the initiative and attacked Fafnir with fireballs. Thus, he prepared the ground for Leo's attack and gave him a sign that everything was ready. Behind the wall of smoke, it was not clear what people had conceived below, so the appearance of Leo nearby, with an outstretched hand for a blow, was a complete surprise for Sen Liu. And then a strong blow fell on the guy's head. Sen Liu flew back a little, and Leo landed on the monster's back. Although the guy got a lot, and he almost lost consciousness and trembled, he was still alive and slowly recovering. Suddenly, San Liu's eyes became red, and he spoke strange things in his voice, saying that the kids tried to kill him, but the game ended on this. Meanwhile, while Leo fought in the sky, Elsa and Walden stayed below. The girl was angry that the guy decided to take everything to himself. And in the sky, the situation was complicated. Even Leo twitched a little, and the man who controlled Sen Liu began to mock him. It turned out that the demonic beast and Sen Liu were controlled by the magician of Tartaros. But the question is where his main body was. In theory, it should be somewhere nearby. The magician urged that he even began the situation, but since Leo knew too much about his true nature, he could not be left alive. And since he was in the body of Sen Liu, he could use his skills to call for spirits, so he attacked the protagonist with the help of wind. Leo stumbled and began to lose balance and fall down under the pressure of his enemy. Sen Liu watched with pleasure as his sworn enemy falls down, like a bag of potatoes. Only in vain did he write off the account so early the main character. But now the time has come to call on Fioror, the cub of the phoenix. As soon as the young man called the chick, he instantly appeared in front of him, ready to help the owner. Now the time has come to the last step of his plan, so Leo smiled in anticipation. This battle made the guy recall the old times. Then he was good in everything that he would not do. But if you look at the situation deeper, you could see that he never reached heights in his endeavors. Another thing is his friends. For example, Duino and Aaron were better than others in the control and use of aura. The moon delighted everyone around with its born magical talent, and most importantly, the ability to apply it in practice. And if you take into account the call, then it was better than the calling man. Then Luzinus could not be found in the whole world. Therefore, he had to find his own path, which could reveal him as a hero and man, so he chose a merger, which he was doing now. In truth, the merger of abilities was a delightful sight. Now Fiora has passed the moment of the transformation that Leo controlled, connecting magic and aura. After the merger of magic with an aura, there was a fusion of magic with spiritual strength, after which the spiritual power merged with magic, and in this closed circle a small chick became a beautiful big bird of Phoenix. Now the mystical fiery creature was much more like Phoenix than before. Leo firmly held onto the paws of Fiora and rejoiced that he had been conceived so far. Fafnir growled menacingly, and the protagonist was not surprised at this, since the aura of the Phoenix was always the most hostile to all dark creatures, so they so aggressively reacted to him. Now Sen Liu and Leo were on equal terms. Both needed information. The first wanted to know where the headman got the Phoenix, the second, where Liu took out Fafnir. But the guys did not want to share their secrets, so San Liu decided to make a move first and kill Leo, since he knew too much about the era of despair. This time, the main character and Fiora were ready to repulse the daring monster. For this, the protagonist activated the secret art of the genus of graders, Phoenix Breath, and the Flaminen's technique. Therefore, at some point, the dark flame of the monster and the hot flame of Phoenix collided in a duel. Leo held on his last strength. Sen Liu rejoiced. He believed that he had a victory in this battle. Only now, when the smoke was dispelled, the guy did not see either living or dead Leo anywhere. But confusion was caused by Sen Liu, and that someone attacked the main body of the magician who controlled the student, so the connection was weak, which means that the perfect opportunity to kill him appeared. At that moment, the young man attacked the monster with his fire right in the mouth. After that, the young man flew off at a decent distance and watched from the side how the monster exploded. Then he thanked Fiora for the well-done work. Now the Phoenix chick again became small, and Leo began to fall down, since he did not successfully foresee it. Meanwhile, not far in the forest on a stump, the Tartaros magician was sitting and conjured. But when he decided to finish Leo, Sidon appeared in the clearing and wrapped him in a trap of his magic. Herod also was not long in coming, and he had a few questions for the evil wizard. Only now he was not going to talk sweetly with professors, so a portal began to appear next to him. The view of this portal was disgusting, but the magician of Tartaros without hesitation disappeared into it, and Herod and Sidon could not do anything about it. Yes, they missed the enemy, but they could not catch it since he thought it over, which meant that the Lumen Academy was no longer safe. Meanwhile, Leo was still in a free fall and pressed Fiora to his chest as the most valuable treasure. But he was lucky, as Professor Yura managed to fly and catch him, after which she lowered it to the ground. Meanwhile, in a dark cave, one of the magicians of Tartaros gathered evil monsters around him and conducted some kind of ritual. He mocked his ally, who managed to lose in the battle to an ordinary student of the academy. The man healed his wound and was angry, because he believed that the main character with an ordinary student could hardly be called. Although it sounded fantastic, the guy was able to conclude a contract with Phoenix, and at first glance to understand that he was not a black wyvern, but a Fafnir. But this information licked interest in the main evil magician. He even began to look forward to a meeting with the main character. After successful salvation, Leo returned to the academy and continued his training. Recently, he has been thinking a lot about everything that happened. The first, a little offensive, was that the selection to the subdivision was stopped. Whether it would resume it is unknown. It also happened that Sen Liu could not survive after their battle and obsession with a magician, and all freshmen realized that being a hero is not so much fun as it was dangerous. All the students of the academy were attended by curiosity, which beast was able to reduce San Liu crazy, but the witnesses of that incident decided to be silent about what happened there. Now the time has come to take a practical exam to Professor Glenn to pass to the magical unit. Most students have already taken places in the audience, so Kelsey and Carl turned around when the doors opened. The last, with a little delay, Chloe came. The guys noticed that she looked unimportant, so they asked if everything was well with her. She ignored them and took the last free place in the audience. Since all the candidates were now assembled, Professor Glenn wanted to start the most interesting, namely, to look at the original spells that will take away the individuality of each student. But he believed that it was necessary to enjoy such a spectacle in the company, so he called Rild Fendi. The company was supposed to be Aidman Slack, and the last guests of the exam were the honor of being Shin Hugis. All three successfully graduated from Lumen Academy 3 years ago and were students of Professor Glenn. Carl naively believed that invited guests put good marks to all, but Leo doubted this. The first to show their unique spells to be Elida. So, she began the demonstration, saying that her main attribute is the magic of light. To the light that the student activated before, she added a magical formula for a flame flower. Altogether gave the effect of powerful thermal magic. It looked amazing, but the tires had the question of how it differs from the already invented laser magic. Elana faded because she did not know how to answer this question. Whatever it was, but the time has come to set assessments, which the girl was looking forward to. As a result, the girl received an assessment of C, although she hoped to get a higher result. Students took turns passing the exam. Carl was lucky to get in plus. He rejoiced at his little victory. but came out of Calci and received A for her magical performance by A. The graduates admitted that this year the students prepared well, but it was still boring, so all hope remained on the last 3 students. And the first of the 3 best students of this year on the stream to the board was Unraveling. He began to withdraw a number of complex and incredible formulas on the board and write long explanations to them. The magic that the young man was going to show the examiners was called a storm. Now everyone in the audience listened to him carefully because they understood that if everything works, it would be something with something. Abat also confirmed their hunch, because at the end of witchcraft, the level of danger to the surrounding will be the highest. The young man trained to use this spell on his estate, in a special barrier that other magicians supported. The tornado, who burst out as if from the heart of Abat himself, was frighteningly huge, impulsive, and uncontrollable. At some point, even Barter could not restrain him, and he broke through a hole in him and broke out. And then near the cube, which was a barrier and defended the outside world from danger, was a small deer who accidentally wandered here. Suddenly, a tornado in front of Abat grabbed a deer and circled him in the sky. The young man was very scared for the life of a cute and defenseless animal. Therefore, he quickly canceled his spells and did it just in time. The deer fell directly into his hands. With what he saw, it was possible to conclude that these spells were aimed at increasing the power of the wind. Moreover, although it looked simple, but the structure was complex, therefore it was difficult to reproduce. Obviously, for this miracle, the young man received the highest score. Professor Glenn shone with happiness and was looking forward to the next student. Now the time has come for the protagonist to surprise and amaze everyone with his original magic. So, the guy put a very high bar in front of him, as he wanted to demonstrate to everyone the system of formulas of infantriotic magic. It turns out that no one to the protagonist raised this question, so the graduates did not hear about such a concept. Leo was not surprised, saying that everyone knew that all the spells based on the attribute. But the fact that Leo invented greatly simplifies both him and everyone else the process of witchcraft. It sounded very arrogantly. Besides, it seemed to the graduates that the guy was in the clouds somewhere in the clouds. The tire was not so radical. She was interested in whether the young man was going to show a completely new alignment system for the spell. This is exactly what the young man was going to do. But Glenn lit up even brighter because he believed that the magician should be just that. The examiner was angry since he came here on an important matter and not to listen to the fairy tale of the freshman. But Professor Glenn with pleasure wanted to listen to the report to the very end and then look at Leo's magic itself. It was clear that the professor would not leave anyone alone until he sees the result, so his former students also agreed to look at Leo's magic. After that, the main character turned to the board and began to paint the main, important moments of his spell. Leo did not pay much attention to the examiners. Moreover, he knew them better that a fundamentally new application system for an hour at one time was used by the Luna Zvezdok. Shin suggested that Leo wants to squeeze her, but did he really believe that he had reached the level of such a great sorceress? This was the most stupid assumption that he heard today, since he never set himself on a par with the moon. After all, the Great Moon was and is the most outstanding sorceress. But in order to create your own system for imposing a spell, you do not need to be a genius, he was sure of that. And the system of formulas and explanations that now everyone could see on the board was a clear evidence. Shin read into every word, peered into every formula, and could not believe her eyes. It was difficult to believe that Leo could bring it to life, because if you think, then he will be able to embody any magic without fines. Meanwhile, Carl and Calci did not even try to understand what their friend drew for the formulas. They simply believed in his success. Chloe, with an empty glass gaze, looked in front of her. Leo continued to answer the questions of the examiners. He created this system of formulas, as he wanted to use all types of magic, without exception. After that, the young man began to demonstrate his spell in practice, saying that their Bible would call. It looked beautiful, but moreover, Shin struck the name of magic because once a fictitious hero created something like that, so she hoped that Leo could prove that Kyle existed. After a couple of moments, the examiners issued Leo estimates and handed the lit with the results of Professor Glenn. It is obvious that he received the highest score. On this, Leo ended his exam and went to sit at the desk. He recalled that 5,000 years ago, he could not finish his unique system of formulas. But this time he succeeded. At that moment, he noticed how Chloe began to rise, as it was her line to speak. The young man drew attention to her condition and asked what was happening to her, but his girlfriend ignored her. The examiners expected something special from her, since everyone said that she was the best student mag of this year. Indeed, the girl dumbfounded everyone as she prepared a non-extinguishing flame for demonstration. Chalsey, like other students, could not understand why Chloe made such a choice because her attribute of the ice magic. The examiners also did not know how to react while the flame was too ordinary, and they expected something from her at the level of Leo and Abat. But this was not the end, so the girl called on the magic of water to clearly show the value of her charms. She specifically doused herself with water, and at the same time, the flame that she kept in her hands all this time did not go out. The essence of this magic was that she would not go out until the caster himself responds, or until he dies. Usually, the spells stopped working if the Manga mana ended, but Chloe was somehow able to create spells that violated this rule. How she did this, no one could understand how he did not try. Chloe painted the basic principles of her unique magic on the board, and was very pleased and proud of herself. Leo was very tense all this time, because he understood that the girl made the impossible, but the question is how. The score, as the girl wanted, received the highest. Leo knew that even the moon at one time could not create a non-extinguishing flame. And only Robos, that 5,000 years ago, that now he could use this kind of flame. The exam ended, and Leo asked Celia to call Chloe, but Cousina said that the girl was still sleeping as she was too hard to prepare for the exam. The girl understood that her cousin was not just looking for Chloe, and suggested that something bad was happening to her classmate. Even Celia noticed the oddities in the behavior of her friend, who have recently become more than usual. Recently, Chloe has quarreled with classmates for no apparent reason and resorted to forbidden magical literature. It was all strange, so the guy went into an empty audience and sat down at the desk. In parallel, he called on Fioror from the world of spirits, since he had several questions, which was worth discussing. At this moment, Fiora from the chick turned into a girl who knew how to speak human language.